Hi, everyone, and welcome to Week in Review with Doooovid. Today we'll be talking about current developments in science, intrigue in the microstream sphere, and finally we'll be touching on some archetypes in the context of recent events. Always relevant, always the most well-read guy in the room, and never boring. Please welcome Doooovid.
Hey, thank you, Jennifer. Glad you're doing this stream. I guess last night didn't work out timing, but glad we were able to schedule for today.
Yeah, you know what? Elliot wanted to have a stream with me, and he's like, "Oh, it'll just take half an hour. I want to tell a story." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." And then the stream ends up going for 5 hours, and I didn't really. I guess I'm too much of a people pleaser sometimes. I don't have the will sometimes to say to stop when I'm getting tired. And then I was like, at the end of the stream, I'm like, you know what? I can't do my normal stream tomorrow because I'm just too zonked. So that's why it got put on pause. But yeah, next week there's a guy, Mark. I think it's Mark Davis. He wanted to go into deeper questions about the cosmology that I subscribe to, as well as couple of other points relating to the quantum mind hypothesis. So that should be a good stream when we get to that. I've also posted a blog post about, it was a little bit about logical fallacies, and it was a little bit about my own theory and the axioms of that. So I can show it on the screen, basically trying to teach using current examples with this stream that this guy called Josh did. And he was talking about logical fallacies, and then I was kind of commenting on what are the limitations of using a logical fallacy type debate strategy or formation of ideas type strategy. Do you find that some logical fallacies are more common than others, Doooovid?
Yeah, I watched that with on his channel. I mean, I think he did like an 8-hour stream, and I wasn't able to watch that, but I did watch the second part with the logical fallacies. I've done, when my consciousness theories, I've covered a lot of these logical fallacies and some of the brain science behind the belief why we fall into those fallacies. And yeah, I do think there are studies that have recorded like correlations or percent that people fall into this. And you have the famous Kahneman studies of the systems 1 and systems 2 thinking that shows that it's almost human nature to be illogical. Like the systems 1 quick thinking that consistently makes mistakes but works with working memory, versus the more slower processing that would require more mistakeless thinking. And I think that's, although the mechanism of system 1 and 2 of there being a biological mechanism to explain it is less clear, but the statistic psychological testing has shown very clearly that people fall into these patterns of mistake. And just the quick thinking model of a person, we're actually in many cases more likely to make logical mistakes than to be correct logically.
Yeah, sorry about the tiny picture there on the screen, audience. I just want to give people maybe I'll post the link to this blog post if people want to read it. I thought it was a pretty interesting subject. I guess I'm kind of more interested in discussing the things that I'm more familiar with. And Doooovid laid the accusation that I was a bit of a preacher. So I guess I'm guilty as charged on that one. And I just hope that we can build a more cogent logical system, because it seems like at some stage the logic can't come in and mediate the outcome of the interaction. So I was just wondering personally if you had noticed that one fallacy kind of stood out over the others, because I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm asking myself the same question, like if there was one logical fallacy that I would say I encounter more than others, I think it would actually be the appeal to what people are kind of used to, the familiarity fallacy. Do you have one that kind of stands out, like between straw man and what are the other common ones?
Straw man is very commonly used in these like internet blood sports, and it's pretty common. It's similar to framing, where the narrative frame makes a difference. So you could consider framing in a positive way for your argument as a form of straw man, kind of like when Luke came on and like who started who owes who, what's the history of these beefs, what was the first action or the escalation, who did what wrong. And depending on how you frame it, one person might shine better light than the other. And that's not necessarily straight strawman. Strawman can come in all different ways, but you also have the steel man, which steel manning is also a fallacy, but sometimes more useful, where you argue in your best faith your understanding of what the person's argument is. But usually when people want to defeat your argument, first they'll say your argument in order for the logic to add up. If you just say like, oh, the idea that you're always expressing, that doesn't necessarily form a logical structure for propositions and proofs. So you usually have to restate it, and then it's to your advantage if you restate it in a way that might not be truly faithful to what the idea the person's trying to express, especially as a rhetorical device in order to kind of win over the crowd and make it like, this guy's representing these false ideas and I'm representing more true ideas. But in reality, it was you that misrepresented the other person idea as false, and in reality the idea that they're saying wasn't the thing that you represented.
Okay, I think I'm getting what this steel man thing is about. I mean, arguably it's not possible to do that. You could take the position on limits of subjective consciousness that nobody could ever describe someone else's position perfectly accurately. But yeah,
a lot of these are crossovers that people break multiple fallacies at the same time. Loaded question and straw manning could go together, or ad hominem. Just the phraseology, the choice of words, using more nefarious, like subversive versus influence or something like that, where the word choice is obviously trying to sway the crowd and is not factually correct in the sense that you're already saying the conclusion by giving a nefarious label to something. So it's the connection of the loaded question, the straw man, where you kind of assume the evidence for what you're trying to conclude in the statement by choosing a negative way of phrasing your opponent's idea.
I guess I think at some stage it's all a circular logic problem, but some circular logic can't be circumvented. So there's always going to be the subjective, objective, parallel in the issue going between them.
Well, we'll come back to Gödel's incompleteness theorem and say that in reality there is no theory that doesn't have logical fallacies, and it's impossible to create such a system that won't have the logical fallacies.
Yeah, I guess I kind of take issue with Gödel's theorem, and I've attempted to disprove it, but ultimately it's based on a philosophical question about what's the definition of truth and what's the structure and geometry of truth versus this particular proof, which I actually think the proof is correct within its own domain of application. I just think it would only really apply to a kind of a computer type system, something that had a kernel. But yeah, we can maybe have that debate at another time. Someone was recently dumb enough to agree to debate me on Aryan invasion theory, so that should be pretty funny. Or not funny for you because you don't laugh, but maybe mildly amusing, I hope.
I mean, not really. I'm saying, like, if you have to do what you have to do, but like defeating easy opponents or whatever is not really amusing. It's more a waste of time, although sometimes you have to do what you have to do, and to call it amusing is a way to kind of give value to the fact that you have to keep on spending time on something that really isn't worthy of spending time on.
Yeah, I guess I totally agree with you. I wish I would never have to do another one of those debates again. Yeah, I was just trying to keep a positive spin on the whole vibe, because it gets so like acrimonious after a while. I guess, are there any debates in the scientific domain that you'd actually want to see?
Well, kind of to sharpen the mind, but no, I want to make progress and move forward on the hard problem of consciousness. So there's a lot of study, and there's a lot of precursor of definitions, like in empiricism and defining terms, and just discussing, because there's so many different topics that you really exhaustively spend hundreds of hours on, and so you have to discussing and have clear definitions of terms and kind of logical rules and purposes of the discourse to move forward. It's like Penrose Hameroff or something like that, where they're from completely different fields, and they're combining their research in order to push forward a new understanding of how systems operates, a process that might explain a very complicated system. So there's two widely respected researchers in completely different fields that are combining their research in their respective fields to push forward a theory that neither one of them themselves would be able to do.
Yeah, it was funny because I was having a conversation with some random scientist guy, and he was talking about Penrose's possible non-singularity universal Big Bang. And then Penrose was also involved in this quantum mind thing with Hameroff. So I find it funny that he's touched on two of the subjects that I'm kind of interested in. So that was cool. I wonder where it's going to go. Like, what do you think would be sort of a way to know that we were going in the right direction for solving the hard problem of consciousness? Like, I'm trying to think of scientific measurable things.
Well, maybe it was interesting your conversation on this stream where you tried to explain the NPC using your quantum mind theory, and then Josh was basically like, he's not going to be able to understand that, and so like the value of the precursors to people who are going to be able to understand the quantum mind. And then the problem to you is you'll have to have a dual way of explaining things to those who understand the theory behind it, and you could explain it in what we call proper scientific model of your explanation of what's happening, and then on a lower level a more watered down explanation for people who don't understand these quantum principles or neurological principles that would still be valuable to them, and they could still understand the gist of the mechanisms that you're proposing. So that's more your duty and your obligation to be able to do that, to to explain, to understand your ideas well enough to know the precursor knowledge that people need to understand your ideas, and then to be able to express your ideas in a way that's valuable to the person at the level they're at. So that's quite a task that will demonstrate your understanding of your own theories when you're able to do that.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I completely agree with you. It's kind of an uphill battle, but at the
same time, you want to do an example? I mean, it might even take like 10 minutes.
Sure.
But if you want, you walk through your NPC and what you would call the proper scientific model of understanding for how you thought the NPC quantum brain is working in a way. Like, what does it mean that a person's an NPC? And then maybe a simpler understanding where a person could understand somewhat what you're saying, even though they don't understand the science to fully appreciate the concept.
Oh yeah, good idea. The way that quantum mind relates to the NPC phenomenon, which is the person who doesn't have an inner voice, I guess it's kind of become a bit of a meme with the NPC from video games, which is a play, like it's a character. I'm sure everybody knows what an NPC is, but in case anyone here doesn't know about video games, it's in those role player games. They have fake characters that just sort of stand around, and you can punch them or rob them, or I don't know what exactly people find fun to do in video games, but they basically don't have a person controlling them. And that's a metaphor for having that extra level of self-control in your mind where you identify more with the subject of the experiences rather than the sense experiences themselves. And the way I explain that with quantum mind is that if you want to think about how the mind actually forms, and unfortunately it's a bit hard to visualize this, but you kind of, if you can think it through from the beginning, you can kind of visualize it more easily. Like starting at the simplest form of life would just be a tiny cell with like a spherical waveform around it. So an invisible spherical thing that represents the energy of the electron field in that living organism. And then as life gets more complex, thing you have to realize is that life doesn't really get very much bigger, relatively speaking. Like humans, in terms of overall size, are actually pretty small compared to some of the animals we've had on Earth. But so we're kind of restricted to a smaller geometric area, which causes a compression in that originally spherical field, because it's bound by the same laws as everything else. It's going to go to lowest energy state that it possibly can go to, so it kind of collapses in towards the body. And that caused it to fold over on itself. And that means your prime consciousness is interfering with itself. And then one of these harmonics, that's like the consciousness of that everybody kind of has, the subjective consciousness. And the inner voice consciousness, the like non-NPC attribute, would be considered another harmonic. So another folding of the mind onto itself so that it can coherently get impressions from more information that exists in the mind. Not sure if that explanation was good or not, but basically the NPCs thing really took off a lot. You don't really see it too much anymore, but people do still make posts. It kind of became like a classic meme, so people just basically, it'll live forever. Some of these memes just have so much staying power that they really, because there's always that like time when you're thinking, oh, you know, that there's that perfect time when that joke would actually be funny. Yeah, okay, so I guess that's all I had to say about NPCs. Do you have any thoughts, Doovid?
Yeah, I've been doing my rambles, like ramblings of a chess coach, and like I did these long series on consciousness, and yeah, I think there's different ways of getting at the issue. And I mentioned Gurdjieff, and actually, hopefully, I'm going to show that video from, and we'll read that quote I showed you for the program, and that video of the dervish dance that might actually explain some of these alt-right debating circles. But this concept of how thought works, and I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, when I'm in these situations where the conversation kind of hits a dead end, a lot of times I'll think about thinking and think about thought process, and what's causing the person's thought process and how they're processing information, what information they have available, and their precursor may be genetic or higher level rules that might cause them to process the information the way they're doing it. So from the neural process, like we said with Faust on the archetype, the dissonance sets in when there's a mismatch between the higher rules and the sense perception. And both of these processes have been pretty clearly shown exist, although how that consciousness actually works, what's the origin of these higher level rules, are they genetic, do they come from some divine inspiration, or is there a way like where there's just the neural networks overthinking so many times eventually adapts the neural networks? These questions aren't answered. They're nowhere near being answered scientifically.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like dangerous in a way, because if the questions aren't answered, people come up with their own answers, and they may not be right, but it kind of sounds compelling enough, and then people assume it's right, and then it's kind of scary, honestly, some of the ideas people have about the origins of the soul and other things.
Right, and that's what we're saying, the current state of research. So someone's academic and they've thoroughly researched the current state of research to know what's going on, and to where further research should be done. But to accept kind of this concept, you have your immediate sense perception that's telling you what's happening, and then you have these precursor past higher level patterns that you believe are going to occur, but in reality may or may not actually occur. So to say, the archetypes that we believe to be correct is, so in order to interact spontaneously with the active changing world, we need these patterns in our mind However, the patterns in our mind are very often incorrect. And that's, triggers and dissonance when, you could tell the pattern type thinking that a person has entered into, and you're saying, the pattern that you're, mechanically using will not accurately explain the information that's available, kind of like Karl Popper, and disproving that it has to be falsifiable. So, a pattern is falsifiable when you show something that triggers a person and demonstrates that their pattern is not correct. And so just to constantly think about that, what are the patterns that the person has in their mind? What's the origin of how they came to believe these patterns are correct? If the patterns are incorrect or only partially correct, what's the process to go through to have deeper level patterns? And the deeper philosophical questions like free will. And I mentioned Gurdjieff and his 80 years ago more esoteric spiritual way of explaining things that might be a hint on how the neural processes works about mechanical man. So like the MPC is basically in mechanical nature and saying that they have limited to no free will because the patterns, higher level archetypes that they have in their brain basically force them into action, and they have no choice to act in any other way than the way that they're somewhat being programmed to act by the higher level patterns that were programmed into them in larger society.
Yeah, it's something I didn't really see coming, is this dialogue about pattern recognition. Because I guess, with doing science, that is what you're doing, but I guess I never put it into those words exactly. And seeing people talking about patterns reminds me of this old quote of, seeing something that, seeing a pattern, the difficult to discern pattern means you're a genius, but seeing a pattern that isn't there makes you insane. And it's hard to reconcile sometimes because people's beliefs are a lot of times in contradiction with each other.
Yeah, and then you're like the levels of thought where you say if it produces a correct result, more than half the time it's useful. So people will constantly fill their mind with patterns, and maybe it only produces a result, the right result 50, 60% of the time. But that's enough. We keep it in our mind, even though it's, a good percentage of the time giving us the wrong result. But that could be better to have, something then like that than no pattern at all. And the person may not know, and they might keep on producing the wrong result and misreading situations. And I think that's like the alt-right with things like race. Does race matter? And so if you're social justice warrior on the left, that pattern, you're just going to keep on going with the higher level pattern. Or if you're on the alt-right, or the different theories where you just have as Luke would call the magic key to unlock the secrets of the universe. And even though that might correctly give you the answer occasionally of the time, it also a substantial amount of time gives you the wrong answer. So that's the NPC that is just stuck in that mire where they're using the same key on every door, even though it only, in reality opens a few doors for them.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That reminds me of Claire Ka and how there might be a pattern that Claire's not recognizing. She's kind of been having a whole lot of streams. I don't know if you watched the one she did with Aaron Amahud.
I was in the middle of that, and you have to decipher out how much good information you're getting out of it. So, if they time-stamped it, and to be short and precise in your words is an extreme value. And it's also one of the benefits of having these streams is somewhat to practice public speaking, to practice expressing your ideas. And the more we do this, the quicker and more precise we'll be able to do that, and to test it with, how do people understand? Like, I think you were kind of like speaking out loud about your failures in rhetoric, where you're like, oh, people don't understand what I'm saying. And you keep on projecting, assuming they know what you know, when in fact they don't. So you have to, devise precise, short ways to explain this key bit of information. So, it's just like, oh, I already did 100 hours of streaming and have years of a blog, you like Jordan Peterson, where he was being interviewed by that woman. He's like, read more. How much have you read? It's not enough, to be like, well, actually, I could give you a very short, like 10-second to 30-second explanation of a whole bunch of things, or I could give an hour-long explanation of a whole bunch of different things, and you appreciate in your own mind how much information that you're giving over. So if it was an intelligent person that knew none of this stuff, but had a reasonably well ability to understand and put together complicated ideas, what in their mind would they be building up with the information you're giving over, let alone people that may not be so quick-witted and may not have good processing ability to put together multiple complicated ideas. And it's like the chess is the thinking example where you're coordinating your pieces. The difference between the one player and the who is good and one player is better is they might be coordinating more forces at the same time, that they could think, they might say more moves and depth at a time, or they're looking at the combination of what multiple pieces might do. And, so one person might be looking at 5 pieces and what they might do over the next few moves. But an even deeper thinker might be thinking about 10 pieces and what they do over the next same moves. So the same thing with any of these thoughts regarding very complicated things like the hard problem of consciousness. You got to know what you've studied and how that applies. So if you're like, okay, I studied physics and some biology, but I don't really know biochemistry or microchemistry or psychology or philosophy, linguistics, all these different fields that are relatively an integral part about describing how the brain processes thought. And then you think like, oh, well, there's impossible for one person to have really mastered all these different fields. And then it's okay, like, well, you might know a little bit about linguistics, even though you haven't studied linguistics, or neuropsychology, or quantum physics, and all these different things. And over time, you get used to, summing people up, how much they know of these different fields and how much that matters for the ideas you're trying to express.
Well, according to this, not very much. So what do you think about the optics? Have you been seeing this blog I've been
yeah, she's been at that for a while, and so it's kind of like a tit for tat, where
she covered the fact that I gave her a wrench with such detail that I don't think I've ever seen anything like it.
Yeah, I told you she's got a high level of intelligence somewhere.
That doesn't seem intelligent to me at all to do that, though.
Well, and just look at the detail. Of course, there's intelligence to be able to, look at your notes on your video where there's like 100 different comments with like timestamps and different ideas, or like, will to power, where she had like her series of like 30 questions for him. So, there's some intelligence, but it seems kind of like haphazard, and it's unclear what the bigger picture is. Is Claire accurately seeing the bigger picture? Or is she just looking through? And like every time you make a misstep, she's kind of there to like try to correct you or call it out. And it seems like the overall message is on some sort of subversive level, where it's unclear what she's doing. But when you think what she's doing, it seems like it's probably subversive in nature.
I feel like she's being perhaps subversive about her intentions, but quite overt about her proclivities. I guess I kind of think, what kind of a message does this send to other people who might want to become initiated into different ideas in this domain, right? I just kind of get the vibe that it comes across as like I call them bullies or tyrants, I guess. People who just really want to get their way and will basically, just seems like she's dug her heels in, and
well, this one rabbi
they will work. So I don't know. Maybe you can help me with some spiritual advice on this. I don't want to like.
Right, let me give you a parallel to free will, and kind of the example that I mentioned too. Free will has to be the case where you have a proclivity pattern that would make it likely for you to act in one way, however you act in the other way. That has to be you do the less likely action. If it it's deterministic and a person always does the more likely action, then there would on a simple logical level, appear to be no room for free will. So it has to be that the person has the power to choose the lesser likely option. And to look at the example of free will as like a border war, like a trench warfare, where you're pushing into enemy territory or you're having the enemy push into your territory. And there's certain aspects that are within your free will and certain aspects that are beyond your free will. And that borderline is always changing, if that makes sense.
I guess so. I guess I kind of feel like I'm living rent free in her mind.
Well, so that's the parallel to kind of the same parallel. We talk like the NPC, where what level of free will is in their power. You were say, okay, they're already being informed of how to understand societal events by larger programmers and certain information. So you say very little free will is actually in their realm because they keep on being fed from a different source about the information that they need and how to process this information. So the only way that they could really demonstrate free will would be to break out of that mold and false pattern that they've possibly forced themselves into. And that would be like conquering territory, where something that was programmed into them all of a sudden became in their realm of free will, where they could actualize their own free will and choice over these matters that historically they haven't been able to. Or sometimes if you conquer someone, to say they had been pre-programmed from one way of doing things and the person's still an NPC, but you were able, through like blood sports or venue or narrative shifting, framing, to now all of a sudden make this NPC one on your side, as opposed to they previously possibly on the opposition side, if that makes sense. Someone could be like an entropist or a secular Quranist, but there's still an NPC, but through the process of blood sports or dialogue or winning over disciples, that the person's still an NPC, but maybe they were converted from an entropist to a secular Quranist or the other way around, without changing their essential NPC status.
Well, I guess I kind of feel that since I live in Claire's head, basically rent free at all times, I'm kind of the queen of Claire in a way. So if they're a secular Quranist, I guess they're a de facto entropist.
Well, so that's where you say, are you actually trying to accomplish something? If you're just talking about your own free will struggles, your own desire to understand these ideas better, versus some sort of like influence. And if it's, influence could be measured through some sort of metrics like, viewership, likes, shares, crowd, donations, or different things that are kind of like, okay, my influence is stretching, like I'm including more and more territory into my area of influence, and these people are now checking my blog and following me and listening to my content and talking about it with different people. So Claire, you actually have to have territory, saying Claire has a reach. Obviously you're different countries and different people. And so the influence channels that the people who are within her sphere of influence become aware of her interactions from you, in those, so your sphere of influence through your interactions with Claire and vice versa have spread across each other's. And some of those battles have been won and lost. Some of the NPCs may remain NPCs, but they're affected by this, changing of borders and boundaries. And other people who are less NPCs may have just taken in new information and still largely have free will and just think, okay, like this is a new idea that they've added to the different conflicting ideas that now are part of their processing when they think about new things that come up.
I'm getting a psychic message from the astral realm, and I'm sensing very deeply that people who are watching would love for you to talk about your most recent live streaming experience. Actually, I'll just play a quick clip from it because it was pretty. If I can just find the timestamp that I had written down. Here we go. I'll just pull it up real quick. It was it had me in stitches. I hate to admit it, Doovid, and every time I laugh at something you say, I also got your voice in my head saying, "Oh, you're laughing is considered degenerate," and I was like, "Oh, Doovid, I just can't help myself. You're too funny." All right, so I'll just play a super, super quick clip, if that's okay, of your appearance on the Blunder Try stream. Okay, so this is at 3:17.
But anyway, all right, guys. Well, this was a pretty incredible week of shows. Doovid, or old Doovid, I guess. Are you fine with being old Doovid and we'll call Ken new Doovid? Does that work for you?
You're Andy Warski, so I said no. I don't.
Oh!
In terms of this, like I'm JF.
Oh no!
People are probably more interested in tuning into you and your jokes, but like I have not found one of your jokes funny in the whole year we've been doing this.
Burn! Sorry. Please do it. Give us your hot take if you could, and then we'll take the conversation wherever you like to go after that.
Yeah, maybe it's like it's funny because it's true, and if you were woke to the overall dynamic the whole time, it never would have been funny the whole time. It may have been more sad. And I'm not sure if you like that comparison of Brundle versus JF, and like he's the Warski and I'm the JF, at least in that dynamic, where he's more popular, has a bigger view, but it's more for being like an irony bro and a comedian, and not for being serious. And you watch him like the other shows, like discussing politics or arguing, or even kind of like Luke Ford trying to set up like a fiction, where you have these two fictional characters, Brundle versus Kyle, arguing, while Luke Ford tries to make money off of it. That will probably still be more popular than Doovid, but people are being more woke to that dynamic. So if you're an NPC and you were just like, okay, I'm Doovid's side or I'm on Brundle's side, and given the nature of the venues that we're in, the majority of the NPC people are by nature on Brundle's side. And to look at that dynamic as it goes on, either they conquer free will and become less mechanical through having meditated or worked, that they've had a venue of free will to look at the ideas more deeply, or it's possible that they could still be an NPC, but due to their programming, they just serve a different master without having any different form of enlightenment.
Well, that's a very deep observation. I guess I think he kind of realized he got a bit more enlightened at the end there, and he said, and you pointed out rightly that who's going to bring the level of discourse that you are. And
can you screen share on me for a minute? I show these dervish dances. Actually, if you want to read that statement I had you put in the description, you put it on me. I'll show these dervish dances while you're doing that.
Sure, sounds good. I'll have a read through of that quote.
Okay, and I get on screen share yet?
Are you okay? Wait, has it started screen sharing for you? Hang on, I just want to make sure here. Sometimes I can't see. Okay, so is it? Yeah, I think it's sharing now. Okay.
So these are from the Gurdjieff, the movie, Meeting with Remarkable Men, the dervishes or Muslim mystics, where you learned this wisdom from. This like a sandcastle. This is like an Enneagram where they're doing sacred dances, and so I mean these actually exist. This would be like not like Osho, but a more dervish retreat. And obviously, this movie was made decades ago, in a time that doesn't exist anymore. But the next dance that comes on is the one that you have to understand for the blood sports and these complicated concepts of subversion and decoys and understanding really what's going on and who's in power. So
would you like me to read the quote now?
Actually, I want to explain this next dance that it comes up, and I'll have you read the quote. So a lot of people function like this, where you have like an inside decoy that is really on the opposition side, but they do it to create unity. It kind of like an internal Judas, where like this guy really wants to kill you, but you want to know who he's talking to, so you keep him on the inside. So here you have like the dervish in the center who's doing the dance, and all the people on the side. And you have like the idiot, so to say, dancing around him, and the people who are trying to grasp the master's wisdom, versus the idiot who's kind of dancing around him, that really probably wants to kill the master and be the master himself. And so the people, the students are at the dilemma: do they really humble themselves to learn from the master, or do they team up with the idiot who's really trying to defeat the master? And I'm not sure you're familiar with these dynamics, but it's expressed here in this dervish dance.
Well, there's probably not a whole lot of dynamics I'm not at least somewhat familiar with.
I mean, you can consider yourself the person in the center, and Brundle's the guy dancing around, and the people are kind of like, who do they believe, you or the person going around, and which one is which? And there's some other like cool dances, but you see just coordination of people and energies. So when you look in these larger circles where you have a lot of people and you don't know whose side they're on, and the people could constantly be switching sides. I mean, we got like Mistopheles and or even like Elliot or Brundle and Babs in the different camps, and one position they're enemies and working against each other, and then all of a sudden they've moved, and the different sides have aligned in a different way, and there's different sacred dances that have been meant to teach the use of these energies. And then so in this movie, then this famous master gives the quote, so if you want to read it now.
Sure thing. Listen, you've now found the conditions in which the desire of your heart can become the reality of your being. Stay here until you acquire a force in you that nothing can destroy. Then you will need to go back into life, and there you will measure yourself constantly with forces which will show you your place. That was a good one.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's like the process of enlightenment. So, okay, you're a student, and it's just like I'm empty on the inside, and I realized that like the patterns and the archetypes that I was going through life with previously are largely failing me, and I'm just like an NPC. So you come onto a master or a place to study, and you really have to stay there until you have this impenetrable force that you've built up on the inside, that you'll be able to stand in any situation. That's kind of like the free will, where you stop becoming a mechanical person, but you could measure yourself by forces that other people in the situation aren't necessarily measuring themselves by. And the reason you're able to do that is because the precursor meditation or study that you've done, that you're going to be able to measure yourself and prevent yourself from falling into archetypal NPC patterns that maybe the larger people in society are a slave to.
Well, I think you touched on something important here. I mean, I think that instant of realization, or the, entertaining of the possibility that someone is an NPC, like that they themselves are an NPC, that's kind of the first step towards not being an NPC anymore. Because if it's never occurred to you, then you're probably an NPC, right? But if you're kind of thinking, wait a minute, am I just this automaton, or am I maybe something more? And that's kind of that first step to the eventual state of the master, as you say in that movie. I originally thought it was an Indian movie, but it's not, is it? It's something else.
No, it's more dervish, like Sufi wisdom. And Gurdjieff was the fourth way, and most famous for your preaching theories about the Enneagram. But he created like a cultic movement. He came from the Georgian Caucasus Mountains in Russia that was war-torn at the time. And then he traveled through Egypt and the Middle East, and then like Kazakhstan, where he studied under these Sufi masters. And then he took that wisdom. He also became like wealthy as a carpet trader, and he would purchase these like huge mansions, and he'd recruit people to come and like join his cult. And then he'd have these sacred dances that he'd teach them. And they were actually very popular, kind of like Madame Blavatsky, where they opened centers across Europe and America and had a lot of famous artists and writers and countercultural people that would go to his retreats and be kind of like a part of his cult. And to some extent, that cult still exists, if you want to consider it similar to like Theosophy, the fourth way, Gurdjieff, but the origins are largely Sufi and wisdom, and different people have traced, which schools, which sandcastles, or where he traveled to, and to try to put his wisdom that he used to open up the fourth way to previous long run centuries, generations of Sufi masters.
Yeah, I still see the Helena Blavatsky seal. There's no religion higher than truth. I don't know if you know that one for the Theosophic Society, I think it is.
Yeah, and that's more in India. I mean, obviously, so Madame Blavatsky was more Hindu Vedic based. Also, I think she liked Tibet more. I mean, she had some Egyptian, but I think she favored the Tibetan wisdom of any of the Vedic wisdom. So Gurdjieff is more Sufi, not necessarily Islamic, but it's interesting just trying to bring that and use that as a method to create these cultic movements and bringing Eastern wisdom. And he was one of the first people that did it before like the Indian gurus became more popular. And either way, there's just a lot of wisdom there. And it's interesting. You have Madame Blavatsky. You had the Star of David and the swastika going back into the late 1800s.
Yeah, Swami kicked her out of the Vedic movement, I think. And she talked to a lot of people in India, but I don't know where she really ended up.
In London. In fact, she gave Gandhi his first Bhagavad Gita when Gandhi was a student in London. So her center, she would divorce. She was married to a Russian aristocrat and got divorced and fled to London and opened up her center there. And then she was in New York, and she met. There's a meeting of her and a lot of the big masters. I think like Manny Hall and Albert Pike, and even Gandhi, and a lot of other people. And her society still exists. At one point, there was over 100 theosophical branches across India and tens across Europe and the United States. And then they had Krishnamurti, the baby boy wonder, peasant Indian boy that they tried to make the world great teacher. We had Annie Besant and I forget the other names. And Krishnamurti came to America and lived a long life. And but there's been somewhat a decline of theosophy. There's a theosophical institute near my house here, and they still have meetings.
The reason I wanted to bring it up was because I see a lot of these proprietarian people using that seal. It's the one I usually see is this one. This first one here. I don't know, for some reason it's not coming up. Yeah, so I've noticed it, and I guess I was wondering if maybe Kurt Doolittle was the reincarnation of Helena Blavatsky. Come back to institute her perfect worldwide utopia in the body.
It's unclear, but I mean,
man.
Yeah, but obviously they chose an Indian to lead their movement, after eventually. So it started with white body people, and then they chose an Indian body person to be the leader of their movement, as where Kurt seems to have white leanings. So I don't know if he's going to take try to culturally appropriate a Vedic movement for only white people, or if he's just having these logical fallacies and he's really taking things from different places and basically plagiarizing by taking these things and just hoping that people don't call him out that he plagiarized.
I don't know. I think with something like law, it's so complex and there's so many ideas have been written down that it's hard to really say at what point it becomes plagiarism. Especially with law. And that's kind of what Kurt concerns himself with is a legal type of system. So I'll admit I haven't read through everything he's put out, but I've kind of tried to get a general idea of what the philosophy is, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know enough about it, and he hasn't written, plagiarism could be a mild, not so bad thing to a very bad thing, depending on how you use the word. But, maybe we could wrap up our talk about our scientific thought. And, I was making my rambles and saying, okay, I'm constantly on the battlefield, but that doesn't change the fact that there's now at this point in my life, thousands of things that I've studied for many hours, tens of hours. And when I have time, I'm thinking about, but time is very limited. I had that, we'll get into maybe the week in review and streaming, but, the big debate with E. Michael Jones. And I got all these Christians on Facebook messaging me, and they want to talk about all these different things. The book of Isaiah and the different prophecies and the laws of kings. And a lot of these things are some interesting to me, and I'm thinking about it, but I've had to put a bookmark in it and table them because time is short. And then, Dharma puts you onto the battlefield, or, if I had a family that I'd have the obligation to constantly be you taking care of my responsibilities or making a living, upkeeping my body, and just the studies that it's very difficult to constantly push forward on so many different things at the same time. So you need kind of like the general big trend things. Like I'm always thinking about consciousness, the hard problem, the quantum mind, at least a few hours a week. And I want to be pushing forward progress on that issue. And maybe, since the summer when I debated JF, I've already read a shelf of books on the topic, and that's not enough. Saying it's an issue that, to really solve, like I was saying, it might be something of the magnitude of inventing the calculus to solve these issues. So it's something where it's unlikely that we're going to be able to solve it, but it doesn't mean that it's not fun or worth dedicating blocks of time to that constantly, and the different issues. So, I thought it was worthwhile to talk about, what we're pushing forward, or your term, like the quantum mind, how you're applying your quantum mind theory to explain more and more things to different people, and maybe your own just rhetorical dialectic devices where we came up with the best ways to use the most precise language to describe things in the most non-confusing way.
Sorry, I had a hard time unmuting myself for some reason. My computer's on the fritz today. That's a lot of questions all at once. Can you just, were you asking me these things to address myself, or were you saying they were subjects you wanted to discuss generally?
Well, I mean, if you want to address them, you can, or we could just move on. But I thought that's why it was, the week in review. If at this point already we could add, we had the science section where we're pushing forward theory. Like we've been talking for a few months now, and we've both had a lot of theories that I've said, that you've said, that other people have said, and that we could kind of push forward what's the current state of all these ideas that we've been discussing for a period of time.
Okay,
and then,
cool. So how long?
Then at the same time we could talk about like people and the actual debates and going on and meta analysis of archetypes. So we talked about archetypes. So at this point, so I'm happy with like this wrapping up the week in review of science, unless you have more comments on it.
Sure, we can wrap her up and go on to the next subject. So did you want me to give examples of rhetoric strategy about science, or just general rhetoric?
Well, it might be good for a different video. Like I've done whole public study sessions.
So sorry, what's our next? Where are we going next? Because I feel like you asked like 4 things there, and I couldn't lock on to which one you wanted to go into first.
What I meant is a week in review. You're like saying, like, obviously we're not going to do like any of these, just what we're streaming about and what other people in the stream. So it was like, okay, we're not using enough logic. So people are talking about the use of logic in streams, and hopefully there'll be more streams where people actually just discuss that. So with the week in review is just discussing the state of research and the state of actual legitimate science being discussed in these streams, without actually using the week in review to discuss the science that we're talking about being discussed in these other streams. And it's worthy topic, and it's good to see that people are dedicating parts of their stream to purely intellectual endeavors, like what's the current state of these ideas, what are the ideas, and just freshening our minds, sharpening our minds with better use of logic.
Yeah, I'm always so happy when streams turn into conversations about science and logic, because I find a lot of the other stuff is kind of negative sometimes, and I wish people were in the positive state of mind more of the time. And I guess science can be creative, so it puts you in a more positive state of mind. I am really glad to see people talking about ideas and moving their own understanding forward first and foremost. And I'll just draw a parallel with the idea of a meme, and when a meme kind of becomes commonplace versus when it's just esoteric or not very well known. Some ideas take longer to congeal than others. Like I've been trying to push this one meme that cats cause toxoplasmosis for a really long time, and it just, some people get it, but it hasn't really caught on in the way some other ones have caught on. So maybe with this quantum mind thing, it'll catch on whenever it becomes part of the dialectic, and it won't be that people, quote, accept my theory so much as they just go with that as the default hypothesis and build from there. And then whether it's true or not, because there's applications they aren't necessarily obsessing over evaluating the truth value of, which is kind of what it's become now, is like, it's not about the arguments, it's just about undermining my credibility as a person, which like people don't seem to realize at some point inverts the perception, because if all these people are attacking you, people just assume that you have a good idea. So there's a lot of stuff that operates at the same time, but at the same time, archetypes are eternal, and stories are archetypes. So sometimes it's, you know, fun to try something new because maybe you'll learn a really good story out of it, and that could be quite spiritually fulfilling, especially if it's a complex story.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad we discussed archetypes. So, you know, that, like I said, when we're talking about the meta-analysis, we're thinking about thinking and processing information, and we're using the current information that we're mutually absorbing. So within these circles, we all know the same names, you know, like Luke, Brundle, Kyle, you know, Jonathan, Melky, Will, you know, Josh. The circles might even be getting bigger and bigger, but we have these common sources of sense perception to understand how we're processing these patterns differently. And you know, so there is just like the news, what happened, what did I miss? Like this week, there were so many streams that we couldn't even watch them all or name them all. There were probably like 100 hours plus of different streamings of people on the streamosphere. You know, so we could do the two part where, you know, let's just say part of what happened, and maybe people in the chat will fill in more of what actually streams happened this week, what was discussed, and kind of moving forward the progression of the archetypes. Who is falling into the different archetypes? Are they possibly changing? Or, you know, like my NPC theory, where sometimes an NPC could be kind of won over and they're now an NPC just for a different master, through you know, the concept of what is blood sports in the way of, you know, rhetoric where you're winning over a crowd or stealing followers away from people by not necessarily enlightening them where they're understanding ideas, but through some, you know, maybe like pathos or ethos where you've just kind of won them over, where they're still an NPC but they've changed camps. And so a lot happened this week. I'm not sure if you want me to go first.
I just wanted to mention real quick to the audience, if you could, if you have any streams you saw this week you thought were particularly good, please say the stream as well as why or when in the stream it was relevant, and maybe we can find some material for a future time. We might start covering some of these streams if they're operating at a quality which is sufficient that we would be comfortable to stream it. So that's what I want to say on that. So please proceed. Sorry, are we? I feel like I'm not sure if I just talked long enough there.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll just say, you know, like I'll go like me in some of the Luke Forts. So I did a bunch of streams this week. I streamed, you know, last Saturday night after we had done a brief week in review while you were still streaming about autonomous vehicles, and I was just interested to put a public study session. And then I did one on usury in preparation for E. Michael Jones. I was on the Brundlecast 3 times this week, and I did some in real life ramblings from different in real life stuff I'm doing. I'm going to be trying to do more in real life, and those are more difficult. And so I had, you know, the engineering foam show, and then my weekly chess volunteering, and then we had a dance party where I actually interviewed and spoke to people. And so I had a lot of streaming this week on my own channel. You know, on Brundle, I was on with E. Michael Jones on, I think that was Tuesday, and E. Michael Jones reposted that to that channel. That it got like almost 17,000 views, so that was very popular. I think a lot of people watched that. Owen Benjamin had mentioned that he watched that. Adam Green from No More Info or something show, pretty popular show, had mentioned that he watched that. So, you know, and then it got put in limited state on E. Michael Jones' channel. So, you know, that was big exposure for me. You know, thousands of people around the world heard Doovid argue about usury with E. Michael Jones. And then, you know, Brundle had his OV versus Aaron video, and then I tried to come on and, you know, that that was a little bit interesting. Then I had another one like Babs was supposed to do one about repatriation and diaspora, but then he got caught up in, so the stream, that new Doovid they're calling, like the Ken Messianic Jew Christian, whatever, came on the show, and maybe he's going to replace me or whatever, like the understanding of that. So that was pretty popular. Luke had a bunch of shows, a bunch of Kyle and Brundle. So Luke is getting all-time high viewership, and people are really enjoy arguing with Kyle, even though no one really seems to agree with Kyle. He's got Luke's taking call-ins, and tens of people are calling in to argue and ask Kyle questions. And Brundle, everyone, it's like Kyle versus everyone night after night, with like the no apologies example where Luke Ford is kind of just like holding down the scale to promote Kyle. We could mention that in terms of the patterns, and where picking winners and losers. Like, now you have a platform and you got 20 people watching, you could kind of like pick winners and losers and help try to give people exposure. And you could try to do that kind of like on merit, who has the best ideas, who's does the most homework and knows how to use their technology. Or for like whatever reason, you could be like, I really want to promote this person. And so Luke is clearly promoting Kyle, and it's causing a lot of rift in his community. And it's unclear, like, is Luke doing it just for money, or what's Luke's motive for doing it? And no one really knows. And then I guess Kevin Michael Grace was in like dire straits financially. And it's funny, the first time I saw Kevin Michael Grace, I compared him to what I heard about like these kind of like old men, God forbid, who are in prison, but read like 10 different newspapers a day. That's like all they do is follow news and read all the newspapers. And they have a really profound grip on current events and politics. And I kind of compared Kevin Michael Grace to that, just the guy who spends like all day reading newspapers and thinking about current events. And he's very good like that, and knows a whole bunch about culture. But it's also kind of like, Luke and Kevin, the bitter old men who didn't accomplish in life what they thought they deserved. And, so God forbid, Kevin, Mike, he's in financial trouble and he's old and broke, but there was a fundraiser and people came through. And I think he, got over $3,000, well, maybe even like $4,000. So people on the Luke Ford show really came through and opened up their pocketbooks and say like they appreciate, that he spends hours every day researching this stuff and giving it over. So that was semi-positive on that. But it's kind of like trying to understand the dynamic where you have kind of these like bitter old men, Luke and Kevin, kind of like taking their anger out on immigrants and minorities. But at the same time, they're hosting Mansoor and Kyle every day. So it's an interesting dynamic, and maybe we'll have some discussion about what are the implications to that. And
why don't we play a clip real quick from one of the recent streams that I thought was pretty hilarious?
Are highly enriched, highly enriched for people who think conspiratorially. That's just a fact. When you have a space more theory, Kyle. No. No, yeah,
that's true by definition. No, that's not a conspiracy. That's true by definition.
Conspiracy theory. It's funny on the right. That's exactly what church meant to be.
No. You're spreading conspiracy theories about the right.
Yeah,
I'm not going to allow you to just spread conspiracy theories.
Yeah. That's exactly what Church of Entropy did. When I talked.
Oh, sick burn, brah. I don't
remember when you and Kyle spoke. Or we talked over if you wanted to reply to E. Michael Jones. I think you did, but I made a point to ask E. Michael Jones about reincarnation, and then he like blasted it and said like people only believe in reincarnation because they're weak and scared. And then he even had like a personal story about this guy who died and told him like, oh, it's okay that I'm going to die because he'll be reincarnated. And in the E. Michael Jones, like, he was like, no, you will not be reincarnated. There is heaven and hell. And somehow he like thinks he like saved this person before they died by trying to tell them about their false belief in reincarnation. If you thought that was worthy of responding to.
Well,
and some people say transmigration of souls. Like I noticed some comments. I call it reincarnation, although I think that the better understanding is actually transmigration of souls than reincarnation. Although he seemed to pretty clearly reject both.
Well, he said that people embrace reincarnation out of, I don't know if the word was desperation or hopelessness or something. He had some dismissive term about it. And I'm like, well, that doesn't disprove it. And it's kind of taking this, I've heard this sanctimonious tone before from Norvin. Oh, people only believe in reincarnation because, you know, XYZ social oppression mechanism. But it's like, does the truth of what actually happens matter at all? And to comment about whether transmigration and reincarnation are the same thing, I would say that the transmigration is the entire process between death and rebirth. Like, okay, let's say transmigration is what happens before reincarnation, right? It's everything from dying or right after you die, going on, and then eventually there's a reuptake. And that would be when the reincarnation started, because that's the actual synchronization between the mind and the body, where everything's getting reformatted and the tissues going from stem cells to being distinguished human based on the information in the quantum mind. So that would be the distinction that I would make for that. I'm always kind of hesitant about which words to use, because there's a distinction between basically massive particles and non-massive particles. And someone was asking in the chat, I think it was Pat Ashley, about.
Yeah, I just meant to ask you, like, it looks like Claire just silenced, like, got rid of Pat Ashley. Like, you gave Claire.
Are you being a tyrant with your wrench? Are you serious? First you bitch till I wrench you, and now you're being a tyrant with the wrench? You know that this is not a tyrannical stream.
I don't know, like, I mean, I was trying, like, I'm having a hard time reading all the chat right now because I got a lot on my mind. But I enjoyed the Pat Ashley's comments, and it just appeared like Claire. God forbid, show at Pat Ashley for no good reason.
Claire, we talked about this, Claire. What's going on, big guy? You tripped my wife.
I don't know if you know how to reverse that to bring Pat Ashley back.
Listen, if one of the mods can handle it, that would be great. I've been really focused on the conversation, so I haven't been reading the chat that much, but I was reminded of something that I'm assuming it's a woman, that she said, about how it is is this metaphysical or something about metaphysical. And I guess you could make that, like, draw that parallel and make an equivalence between them. And you could say physical is like material, and then metaphysical is anything that's in the light domain. So it looks like that's where it's going. Like, I'm always reticent to use words like metaphysical, because it's usually associated with people who aren't particularly intellectual and misrepresent things and sort of breed degeneracy. It's sort of like wishy-washy hippie sounding, but maybe it's just serious enough that you could actually get some legitimately good people. Because I think if someone's genuinely interested in philosophy, that they can learn this stuff, but they really have to be genuinely interested in what actually philosophy is, because it isn't easy. But yeah, that was a bit of a digression. So we were, I don't know about this commentary on what E. Michael Jones said. Like, I feel the same way about that debate as all the other debates we were talking about before. Like, they've been done to death. They've been done so many times that it's tiresome. So you just, like, try to find new ways to, like, dress it up so it's less boring, and it becomes more of, like, clownish sort of humor and absurdity. So I guess that's another one of those. But
well, he's somewhat like an authority figure, so people that don't really understand what you're talking about, so like E. Michael Jones would just definitively, reincarnation is nonsense, only a fool would talk about that, and that was viewed by 17,000 people, and everyone who was watching that is just like, oh, Church of Entropy, like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. E. Michael Jones said that was nonsense.
Well, someone at that stage is probably not open to hearing it, and God bless them, but, like, I can't change the facts. I can't change the laws of nature, even if I wanted to. Couldn't do that. So I guess in that case, it's just like a situation of more or less just, I don't want to say giving up, but maybe one day he'll change his mind. But at this stage, he kind of seems to have this persona. Like, he's one of these people who has a persona that he's super attached to. And that Jared Taylor guy, it's the same thing, who hide, ha, ha, ha. He's got this whole, like, elephantish kind of, in a Ganesha sense, kind of pseudo archetype going. And I don't really see these people changing their minds, not so much for old age, but just for having that rigid persona that if they stop being that persona due to a change in belief, then their ego would basically shatter and there'd be nothing left.
Yeah, I thought I caught E. Michael Jones in a logical fallacies, false circular reasoning, where he's saying, the reason the Jews have this revolutionary spirit is because they reject logos. And then he also says, like, the Jews aren't special anymore. The church is special. The followers of Jesus Christ are the real, Israel, and there's nothing special about Israel anymore. So he seems to contradict himself. In that, then they asked him, like, well, what's the difference if, any Gentile rejects logos and when a Jew rejects logos? He's like, no, it's a bigger deal when Jews reject logos because of what? So he seemed to have caught himself in a fallacy there where like, what is it? Either the Jews have no chosen people status anymore, and then there shouldn't be a difference between, the Jewish revolutionary spirit and any other person who rejects logos, or the Jews are the chosen people, and it's a bigger amplification when the Jews reject logos because of, the original covenant. And he seemed to clearly say both things. So I think I at least caught him on a inconsistency. And if anyone watched that, if that was a thought, thought in the JQ, like that. And I use the expression, like, the Jews, the blood of the prophets flowing through us, that the Jewish blood matters because there's prophetic blood, in the descendants. But then he completely rejects that. Like, no, there's nothing. It doesn't matter if you're a Jew or not, because once the new covenant came, it makes no difference. But then, like, what's the source of the Jewish revolutionary spirit? So, I mean, he might be able to have some sort of dancing around answers, but I thought there was a pretty clear, like, logical inconsistency in what he was saying.
Well, I just didn't think his approach to reincarnation was particularly logical. And, they want to keep invoking this logos thing, but they won't actually go where the evidence leads. So it's kind of hard to take him seriously. And I'm not surprised that he contradicted himself, because he's really just sort of stitching things together to corroborate a worldview he's already decided on. He's just finding anecdotes to justify it at this stage. I'm sure he's heard these arguments before. I mean, how old is the guy? Like...
Yeah, I mean, he might be even like 70. I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel bad for these people, because I think in the end their ideas are kind of going to be a bit laughed at. So I choose, not to focus on that a whole lot. But I hope people take a step back and, even if you're an NPC, be reasonable type thing. I mean, if two things are, markedly different, then only one can be true. Even possibly both of them are not true. So it's very hard to tell sometimes. And that's why we're here to help clear some of that stuff up and hopefully make a better experience for everybody. Because I think there's some stuff that really makes the streaming culture better, and then other stuff that really just poisons it and makes it just hostile. And I don't know, I'm just imagining the mind of an unaffiliated person. Like, do you really want to give that vibe off? No one's going to want to be your friend, basically, if there's this air of, I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's just bad vibes in general.
Yeah, maybe you could give your week in review, talk about the streams you did this week, or the ones you appeared on, or maybe the people that I didn't mention that made a bunch of streams. I know, like, Josh Neal he's supposedly not going to be streaming for a whole month, and he did this like 8-hour stream. And then he did another stream after that, and Claire had, like, streams every day, and Jonathan Pohl had streams every day. And, there are a lot of streams. OV last week, you did quite a few streams. I don't know if Will to Power or other people through, that I don't really know except through you, are doing a bunch of streams.
Yeah,
so it seemed like there was way more than was watchable this week. Like, literally hundreds of hours of, like, people in the streamosphere that, familiar from these different streams were done this week.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but I guess you're right. Do you keep up with the poll ones? Because I only tune in, occasionally when I see
it. Not at all. Like I sometimes check to see that he's streaming or who's on, but he doesn't timestamp them. You don't really do that either. Sometimes someone like Claire or Cultural Bear will do that for you. So timestamping makes a big difference, or they're not even clear what he's talking about. So it's like at least topical where you could pop on. And like I watched that one with no apologies about logic, because it was, it was like, and I watched them in 2-speed, but at least I knew what you were talking about. And you know, Luke, at least he timestamps it, so I could watch a good few hours of Luke each week. I watched like the White Shift, Kevin Michael Grace's Friday book thing, and I haven't watched part of his movie review for the Manchurian Candidate and some of the Kyle Brundle or different parts on different topics. But you know, that's largely to the credit of Luke for timestamping his videos. And it's like Halsey. I don't think I watched any Halsey this week. I don't even know if I liked any of his videos, but sometimes I do watch a few hours of Halsey. But it's a lot of benefit to your audience. You know, will you actually timestamp your video, and will you actually give a pretty accurate description in the title, what you're talking about, or make it easy, you know, people know who's on the show when they come on the show, that make it more likely. So it's like, you know, Jonathan Poll, a lot of that might be interesting, but you know, are you really going to flip through 20 hours of his shows this week to try to you know, figure out where the parts that are interesting to you? And Claire is a little bit better at doing that. At least she gives better titles to what she's talking about, and will sometimes timestamp them.
Yeah, good point. I guess if people want me to know what it is that they're saying about me, they have to timestamp their videos and then hope I go through all their videos and watch them. It is nice to hear people talking about my ideas for a change rather than just talking about me as some, you know, ultimate evil in the universe. So that's always good. In terms of the other stuff that's happened for me this week, not too much. I wrote that article that I've got up on the screen now. That was fun. And there's been some ideas that I've been developing, but couldn't really put them forth before I had a chance to kind of bounce them off someone. So I'm glad that drunk stream happened with Josh. But yeah, it was a bit of a shit show, but you know, things will probably get funnier going forward. So I guess I'm just trying to engender an attitude of like not really wanting to scare people away from joining, and not feeling like that if they're going to talk to me, they're necessarily going to get attacked. Like I don't want that to happen ever. And just, I guess, keeping away the bad people, the people that I consider to debate in bad faith. And I guess I just feel like Claire is one of those people, unfortunately.
People are asking, like, you know, like this guy Ken who came on and you somewhat debated me, and I kind of just like backed out because I was I was trying to wrap it up and leave, and then, you know, the topic switches, and he had sound issues where his voice was kind of like blaring in my earpiece, and then everyone's like, oh, the new Doovid, like, you know, I guess maybe he kind of looks like me, he's got a beard, and you know, but he's the Jesus believing Torah Jew, and it was unclear, and it was just kind of like, okay, like most of the people who watch Brundle are against me, or would be happy for someone to, so to say, like defeat me and replace me. And that's part of, you know, I said the blood sports, when you talk about the NPC, where you could actually win over an audience. So if it's Claire, if it's, you know, one of many people where you think like, I'm trying to build an audience and spread my ideas. So if I could just kind of knock one guy off the platform, you know, so it's like Brundle, maybe it's going to be like UBI, Greg Johnson wants to come on, and looking for people to debate, and you know, so Brundle is going to have Doovid talk to Greg Johnson, and maybe people are, you know, who knows if that's going to happen, but other people are like, oh, you know, Greg Johnson's a big name in the alt-right, and, you know, like, what if, you know, Brundle should have Claire do it, or Eki, or, you know, any of these different names that would be better for them to build their career by giving up a platform, which creates a little competition, and sometimes it could be good competition, and sometimes it's just kind of pointless. So that's why I was like backing out. Like, you like this new Doovid, whoever this guy Ken was, you could have him, like, fine, I don't need to be on Brundle's channel. And you just kind of look at all, you know, the trolls or the unfriendly chat where people want to see blood, they want to see you get defeated, and Luke trying to use that as a model with these recurring battles between Kyle and Brundle, where really the goal is kind of to make money. And it's, to me, they're just kind of stupid because they're just rehashing the same arguments again and again with very little added scholarship. And then Luke is just like, he wants to make money. He sees the business model, the future of internet blood sports is, you know, Kyle and Brundle going at each other again every night, with just like the little value added information that Kevin Michael Grace is giving. and he might be right that there might be a business model in it. But I think it's.
I just feel like the optics of a bunch of disgruntled, older men dogpiling someone who's barely, not a teenager anymore. It's just bad optics. No matter how much Kyle, quote, owns the libs or however he sees it, he still kind of bad optics, I think. There's no way to win. It's like beating up a 5-year-old kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of strange, but there appears to be a lot of demand for it and a profitable business model. So chances are, if it works, Luke will do it. You're saying if it makes some money and get some viewership, that's probably what he's going to do. And Brundle also, they have those personality types where, just he likes the crowd and the feel from the crowd being behind him, and, especially the money or the viewers, that if they get that and it feeds their narcissism, they're going to go with it.
That's so.
So the thinkers, and it could feed into like, okay, the people watching Jonathan or you or me or the different channels that are, saying like, nah, that's not really what I want. So, the viewership for that might be going up in kind of like a Worski type way. But at the same time, the people that are looking for more intellectual things are looking for, the guests that appear just for a few minutes and like, oh, that guy had a well thought out opinion. And, I didn't really like the whole like bant back and forth. And I'm just going to look for them to introduce new names and faces into the streamosphere, the micro streamers, to follow for these, different ideas. And, if it's possible, like you or me, to have a more friendly, smaller channel and saying like, okay, I don't really care about making the money or building up the viewership. I'd rather have a small, friendly channel where what I'm talking about is what the chat's interested in. And you could have a friendly relationship with the chat where they're helping forward the ideas, as opposed to like trying to destroy people for, whatever entertainment value that causes people to want to be involved in that.
I really think maybe there's a cheap laughs, but I don't think it makes people want to be involved in something. And yeah, I prefer the idea of the smaller, more friendly channel, because then it's more interesting because you actually get a background on people rather than just a one-off. And it really does enrich your life a lot to have friends. I mean, not everyone on the internet's a friend, but I think you can certainly meet friends on the internet.
And Babs moved into that. I think he had like Levy visited him and they did a stream, and then that Anon Wyatt visited Babs. So, that might be moving in that direction. It's like I'm doing more in real life stuff that, people maybe that I know in real life will become more comfortable with the whole kind of streaming and being filmed and people commenting on like what's going on, that and to how to speak and talk to people. So I had my synagogue and like I was showing him the alt-right trolls, so to say, that at my party at the synagogue where I was having them comment to the trolls in the chat that, that like you're in real life friends that the chat is so harsh on, or they're young, that it's like, oh, I can't even come on your channel because the trolls are so mean. That there might be a way where, okay, like Blunder or Meth or the different trolls are just saying it's not worth trolling these people again and again. Blunder got, he didn't get a second strike this week, but one of his videos got put in limited state, and that video that Michael Jones reposted of me on Usury got put in limited state. So it's thinking like, what's the future of the trolling? And Luke Ford kind of like switching back where he's like, hosting TRS and, one of the more edgy people on YouTube, where now he's kind of became like the, like the ADL, like, you got to follow the rules. What's wrong with you? So he might, make that shift and be able to successfully do it because he wants to keep his channel intact and make money and a living and increase viewership. But that will create frustration from a lot of the people that were like, what was funny a few weeks ago is no longer funny. As you say, what was funny before is not funny anymore. And
testosterone in the chat says Doovid is right, to be honest. Doovid makes some good points. So I was just going to comment on the chat. It does seem like it's actually not as bad. The amount of trolls seems to actually have gone down to almost zero. Maybe they finally got bored.
Well, Claire seemed, you didn't seem to get Pat Ashley back, and it's like, okay, Claire, in these contests where whatever reason there's like blood sports between different people, and it's like a beef, and it's like, okay, oh, Doovid and Jennifer are doing talking, but then you come into the chat and it's like, oh my God, my enemy's here. So the person's like triggered that they're not really following the show, they're just fighting the enemy in their own chat, and that's an offshoot of possibly these NPC. You're trying to like win the battlefield of ideas or political candidating, and unlikely it's like not what I'm involved in this. Like, I like spreading ideas and pushing new ideas and maybe winning over hearts and minds, but like the preacher, this guy Ken who came at me at Brundle's, like, you don't really want to talk to me, you want to preach. You're asking questions in order that you could answer them, and you really just want to say this guy's wrong, and whatever you had been putting your energy into listening to what this guy's saying would be better spent listening to what I'm saying. And once like I showed that dervish dancing thing, or called Brundle the Storm Master, from the group formation theory of forming, storming, norming, and performing, that Brundle had been the Storm Master. And as the storming phase moves on, Brundle's role will be less and less needed. I mean, there might always be room for for storming, but you only need to storm new initiates, and once you've been initiated, the Storm Master is basically relevant to you.
Yeah, I was wondering, what was that guy calling you, Doovid? He said your name wrong.
Duvinic or something like that. I mean, didn't even make sense, but yeah, I rewatched that and I kind of understood what he was saying. I've heard a lot of those thoughts before, and we could probably have a friendly conversation. But it seemed like he wanted to preach, so I just kind of like backed out, and like, you want the mic, you could have it, and whatever. That I'm still happy with that. So like, if Brundle wants to give him the mic for permanently or a few weeks or a few shows, or if he was just goofing off and like he's not going to want to bring that guy on again, who knows? So I'm not even trying to predict that. I'm going to do my UBI.
There's like several facets to the conversation, so it's really tricky because like, you are one of the better debaters, and then there's like the flame wars where people get all triggered by the things that you say. So I don't think you're replaceable, Doovid. I kind of feel bad for this other guy. I haven't seen any of his other stuff, but he seemed a little congested.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just came to the channel. He saw me versus E. Michael Jones, probably on E. Michael Jones' channel, and then he came to Brundle to discuss that. And he was just taking advantage of the situation in terms of like a Luke Ford hosting, like what's going to make money. I think Brundle's actually started making money off of it. Like, he might have made like even like $100 the last 2 weeks, which isn't a lot of money, but like relatively, that's $100 is still a sizable chunk of money. And that shows that like, he might be viable in terms of making at least a decent supplementary income from doing it, which is further than anybody else. I mean, Luke, obviously he raised just this last today over $3,000 for Kevin Michael Grace, and he's making maybe $50 on a show on average. So that's pretty good. I mean, he's not quite quitting his job, but Luke could even be at the point where he's ready to like quit his job and do it full time. And Brundle is probably within these circles the only one who who's even made a sizable dent of money. And Babs is here in the chat, and he was mentioning like, yep, he's meeting people in real life. If he meets real people, he'll put them up and party with them in New York. And Doovid might even be like that in Detroit. That's why I said, like,
hi, Babs. How's it going, buddy? Thanks for coming by. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there. Yeah, Culture Bear just joined. Thanks for coming by.
Hi, everyone. Hi, David.
Would you like to share your thoughts or on anything you've heard, or if you had an idea relevant to the topics we're discussing today?
Sure. Well, firstly, I'd like to say it's nice to be on the show, and really like that shirt you're wearing, David, and I think it's color coordinated with the yarmulke.
Yep, thank you. I purposely did that.
yeah, it's a nice color, nice combination. Well, you actually had just gotten around to this who Brundle Tribe was calling him Doovid, new Doovid. I think you just started talking about him. I had some thoughts about him. Actually, I just said it on our V stream, but I can say it again. It sort of feels like a lot of the especially the Americans, have this love-hate relationship with Jews, because you could see when this other person, New Doovid as they called him, when he said what Blunder wanted to hear and also Otto wanted to hear, they were just over the moon to have this Jewish person agree with him. I thought it was pretty disconcerting, actually. It's like I feel like they're sort of orientated to a Jewish worldview and they don't even know it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of dynamics. So, like, obviously, the people watching the show, they're going to be more likely to want a Christian, more likely to want someone with, some of the views that he had. He was anti-immigration and these different things. So it's just like, oh, they found, like, their right fit. They want someone who matches and correlates. They could be like, okay, I enjoy Doovid. I enjoy his commentary and what he says, but I disagree with him on all these different issues. So if I could just find someone that has the likable points that they like about me, but doesn't have the the opinions on the issues they so strongly disagree with, then they're going to replace me instantly. So it's saying like, well, are they going to find my replacement, or is it kind of like silly to look and creates this bad atmosphere where everyone's trying constantly to replace each other, and that's why I said the Storm Master, and that's part of the duty of the Storm Master to do that. That is saying like, what's your function? Why are we in this team together? What integral role are you filling? And if there's someone else who fills that role better than you, why should I just replace you?
Yikes, what a cutthroat way to live.
I wanted to jump in there. Yeah, I mean, I think they've got this karma. You could call it karma, whatever it is, where they want to convert Jews. So, and that if Jews don't convert, it sort of makes them sort of more hateful of Jews than someone like me who doesn't really have a background with Jews, to be honest. That's why I call it like a love-hate relationship. And I mean, to me, the most obvious thing is how emotional they were of this person saying that Jews should convert to Christianity. Well, follow Christ, I think he said. It's a bit disconcerting, and it's something that is in the ranks of Christians that it's a bit alien to me.
Well, were you on any streams? Like, I see you around culture just from this channel, but yeah, I think the number of people streaming and the pure volume of the time that they're streaming is increasing. So it's too much to follow. And like, someone like Will the Power that, like, or even OV, or there might be new realms of people that, coming from like a Blunder Try or something. They may have never heard of Will the Power, these different people. But at the same time that they're streams are getting bigger and there's more people talking about more different things. So I don't know if you fill in different corners of the web that haven't been filled in yet.
Well, I think a lot of the people in the micro stream sphere, just to keep up with it, are probably paying less attention to other things on the internet, or maybe, God forbid, even not taking notice of things in real life as much as they should, because there's quite a bit of information to go around. I think just talking to each other on these streams is actually a good way of filling each other in on like a shorthand version of what's going on elsewhere, because we can't listen to all the streams. Like probably the best any of us can do. Well, actually, Doovid, you probably listen to more than anyone else because you have to talk about listening to them in double speed and stuff.
Well, yeah, man, I listen to parts, and that's why I was talking about the benefit that Luke does with timestamping and the table of contents, and somewhat just being a computer geek is beneficial for maximizing your time to follow what's going on. And I said I think of the last week that it's extremely valuable to have like, oh, I was thinking about these ideas and I really wish I had someone who was interested in the same ideas so we could discuss that. And if it's like the quantum mind or something, that's something that I almost never meet in real life. People are interested in the quantum mind, although it's something extremely interesting. So the power of YouTube, they're like, oh my God, there's other people interested and we could just stream and talk about a common interest. But there's also like the dynamics of building up a platform and keeping an audience base that you have to learn, like the etiquette of micro streaming and the politics and the blood sports, or making yourself interesting or promoting your ideas. Putting all these things together is very complicated. But as the number of streams increase and the storming, we move past the storming phase into the performing phase, it might become more easy, where it just be like, oh, this is what I was thinking about. And these are the people that will probably also be interested in talking about these things, and these will be the available streams or the process to go through to getting on a stream to talking with the people in the community that are interested in talking about those same things.
When we talk about the quantum mind and also the community, you can see that the community is sort of developing some sort of quantum mind connection, or whatever you want to think the origin is. There is some sort of a psychic or mental connection forming between the people in the community. I think there's maybe, I mean, it's a bit nebulous what the community actually is. You could say there's maybe 10 streamers and maybe like 50 to 100 people who come on the streams. It's not that big a community, but it's a good niche. I like it.
I have no clue what the numbers are. I can just more or less measure influence, and that's hard to get meta-analytics on. So honestly, I'm happy with the way things are going, and sure, we'll see some amazing things coming up in the future, and maybe this barrage of live streams is people getting in touch with their creative side in some sense or another. And we kind of get to learn about people's souls through the expression of their creativity. And that does generate a certain amount of empathy. And yeah, there's the whole psychic thing, which science has denied it for so long. It's so fun, that now we can go through it and find out who was actually right about all their predictions.
Yeah, we did a few weeks ago the group formation theory with the forming, storming, norming, and performing. Is you could see that happening across different streams. So you have like OV, like the Bab style stream. That's kind of like the forming, where you have tens of people who are just talking for hours, 8 hours straight about whatever, and it's kind of like, okay, what are you talking about? Talk about whatever they're talking about, and then eventually maybe the forum will clear enough where I could lead a discussion in what I'm interested in talking about. And then from there, like there's the storming where someone like Brundle comes on. It's like, you're just not interesting enough, or like, if you have to obey by these rules, if you want to be big, and to kind of turning everyone against each other. Well, why are we on the stream together? Why are we even talking to each other? To more norming, where it's saying like, no, I'm talking with these people because we have common interest or common goals or whatever. And then actually performing where it'd be like, okay, like we have the stream planned, archetypes or quantum mind, and we've gathered together the experts on the subject who have done the research, and we're going to be giving you a high value stream where it's high quality information because we went through the process already.
Well, it's good to do some preparation at least. Like, I mean, you're probably the king of preparation, but I have started writing things down on paper. Just things that you hear like in the stream sphere and in the mainstream media as well, and what people are talking about in the stream or in the chat. It sort of helps direct our energies and sort of fills up blank time, you could say. I see Melky's in the chat. He's sounding more based recently from my perspective.
Hi, Melky. I saw you on the stream there.
Sometimes people just want to test ideas also. So it's not really, so to say, conversations in good faith, but someone just like, and they might not even really agree with the idea they're putting forward, but they just want a venue to kind of hash out these ideas that they're having in their own head. And, Melky could fit between many different personas, where he could be like this preacher who's trying to convert people to someone just like, I was thinking these interesting things, and, is it possible we could discuss it for a while? And I could argue either side of it just because it's an interesting thing to talk about, and I want to get to understand it deeper.
According to Babs, it's storming, norming, performing, and norving.
Yeah, so my strategy is to start on the norving phase.
Is he still streaming? I have stopped paying attention.
He's still out there. I think he's probably at all-time high viewership also. I think like everyone in these circles relatively is increasing their viewership.
Yeah,
and he also started in real life stuff.
Yeah, I saw that. He was talking at a park, and there didn't seem to be anyone else there. But I can respect his guts.
but it's more than he'd been doing previously, and the numbers seem to be getting higher. And you recognize some of the names. Well, I think JF might have hit a standstill, like that. His booking agent Pravada, that I think you wrenched this week and came through. He's the one who's like looking for places to book Greg Johnson, where he's basically hit the end of his booking limit, and I think JF's viewership is taking a small decline. Although I mean he's still probably long-term viable in making his living, but he might have hit a plateau.
I saw he had good views today. I've stopped watching him. It's sort of an atmosphere.
Plateaued. We're at a pretty small level, so like okay, we're increasing viewers to get up to like 20 or a few hundred views. So I mean, he already had a pretty high content. So him hitting a plateau isn't necessarily the end of the world.
Oh sure, I guess something that puts me off is when someone gets too popular, they seem to develop an atmosphere where they're worried about their reputation too much, or it just seems more like the mainstream media. And that's something that most of us are trying to get away from, to some extent.
But if you're a streamer, that's what you're trying to get into. So Luke is like a JF wannabe. He wants to be, economically viable, so he could do it every night and make a living off of it. So that's not our goal, as far as I know. Like, I don't really want to do this more than a few times a week. And I only want to do it topically. Like, I don't want to have like the pressure, like, oh, I got to come out and say something and talk about things I don't really want to talk about, because that's not my personality type.
No, and some of us have a different financial situation than others. But water finds its level, as you say, and people end up sort of in the appropriate circles for themselves. Sort of like evolution.
But you got to get started somewhere, and people who have those platforms like Luke or even Brundlefly now, you could give you a platform. So even just going on Blunder's show could switch you from having no viewers to having 10 viewers.
Yeah, sure. And he
but also has the trolling.
He'd been around longer. I mean, his channel's pretty popular. I'm sort of surprised he's got so popular. Maybe that was your fault, David.
Well, because there's demand. There's demand for news, or just to be on every day. Sometimes so to say, there's a community created, so you're just on the internet and we're like, who do I know that's talking? And you go through and it's like, okay, no one's streaming. And then you say, so someone who produces regular content, it becomes like a hub. Like Luke Ford is the hub because he's out there for like 3 hours every single day. And so it's just a hub. It's a regular occurrence. You can get in the chat, speak to people and get connected to these other micro streams on different topics.
It's getting a bit more nebulous as the micro streams sort of move up a bit. And I was thinking, if they keep getting more popular, we'll probably look back on now as like being the best period of the micro streams, because it'll be harder when you have like more and more people coming in. There'll be more threats of flagging and sort of a less cozy atmosphere, and maybe a less intellectual atmosphere as well.
I actually think we can maintain the high intellectual level just based on who we have on the show. Because some people, they have some good ideas and want to work things out. Other people are kind of in a different mode of consciousness, and whatever, they're not going to change, and it's not up to us to change them. But I'm sure that no matter what the quality of the audience, we can keep the quality of the show pretty high, just because we know enough people that we can kind of bring, like, the sort of vetting process is almost built into it, because it's just like other people's contacts that we already know.
But hopefully there's going to be people that topically come on, like the archetypes and the quantum mind and the different things we have interest, that people we've never heard of that have interest in the topic, that the Google algorithm will eventually work in your favor, where someone like our discussion, archetypes or quantum mind, reincarnation, and these topics will start appearing in the algorithm of other people, and it'll attract people to watch our content that are interested in the same things, and then eventually to join the discussion, leading to higher producing outcomes.
Well, speaking of the algorithm, I think it was Coach Red Pill who's sort of looked down upon in these circles. One of his videos, so his sort of normie tier videos about male self-help, got picked up by the Google algorithm, and I think he's got a big channel now. I don't know. At least the channel got big. I don't know if he's still big though.
Oh yeah, he's so influential. I mean, people are always talking to me about Coach Red Pill.
Well, influence is going to be a different thing between making an opinion maker and being able to change the minds of people, across the world, or even in, a small community, to even change your community. That's a different issue than just getting your ideas out there or making your stream comfortable. So let's say the algorithm's working in your favor. So people who you have no idea who they are, you've never met before, but just through the algorithm are coming onto your content, and that they would feel comfortable enough to join the stream and be like, hey, you know what? I've been putting a lot of thought and research into that exact same thing, and let's come on and talk. And you might be able to do some research into their content, and getting rid of the trolls, or or the negative things on your channel or chat that would decrease the likelihood that people would be scared of your channel.
Well, it's nice to see, but actually, there's a new guy who came on another stream the other night. I forget whose channel it was. Someone called Lothar. He's obviously well educated in science and technology. So that's a good example of how smart people will find their place. Although listening to it again, he sort of came across. I noticed he never said anything original, but he did seem to have a good knowledge of science and technology. I think he was a programmer, and he sort of pushed back against Jen and some science theories. I think actually OV was there. Yeah, OV was there, and he.
I don't understand what this pushback means. He parroted the mainstream narrative for infinity times, but I don't know what he was back on exactly.
He was trying to push back, and he did have good knowledge. But if you listen to it, he was basically recapitulating something you can get off Wikipedia. So it was a bit unimpressive in that sense, but he's just new, and I would say he's probably about 30 years old. So I mean,
are you sure this guy is already a streamer?
Yeah. He'd never been on. He was trying to figure out.
Never been on that show, so he's never been on any show ever.
I don't believe so, because I think he was trying to figure out with Will in the chat how he could get on. So I don't think he's ever been on. So yeah, his confidence was pretty good. He
seemed like he had some experience, but could just be a very well-spoken person.
Yeah, maybe he does like conferences or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to talk to him again. It's just we have essentially different philosophies, so it becomes a challenge to bridge the gap for a lot of situations, really, and the outcomes are not always favorable. And I'm not really interested in like steamrolling people, but I guess it's probably going to come across that way, unfortunately, in some cases. But I think my opinions are pretty rational, so it's all that it's all I can really say. And if people who are in science want to talk to me, I'd love to talk to you and explain things to you. But I've had all the basic, I know all the basic talking points of mainstream science. So if I am saying something that's not in conformity with that, it's because I've thought it out and I've concluded that there's a better explanation, basically.
And it makes me think, what is it that makes someone welcome or less welcome in these circles? And just listening to him, I was a bit annoyed just because he was so attached to the mainstream narrative and the conventional views. And I think that's something that is a block for people getting into these circles. And also, that's something that's a negative thing. But all in all, I think eclecticism is probably the key word for these circles. It's a very eclectic circle. So I guess there is room for people who are like
eclectic
normies.
Eccentrics.
Yeah, there's room for people who are a bit blue-pilled or a bit normie-ish like himself, and also controlled opposition even.
Well, a lot of normies, I don't like controlled up. A lot of normies, they think that their self-perception is that they're kind of open-minded and rational people. So they sometimes like it just on the basis of that, without having to go into the weeds with the ideological sort of divergence. But I try to keep it, broad broad spectrum attractive, but at the same time make it clear what's expected, you know, for the behavior on the stream. And I think we're actually doing a pretty good job, or for my own standard, I think I'm doing an okay job. I think people are getting better at it. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool to meet new people because you see who kind of gravitates towards which streams, and maybe that's what it'll be like in the future, just like friend streams. So if you're the kind of person who basically has no friends because you've alienated everybody through bad behavior, it's probably going to be a pretty sad time.
I certainly like talking to different people. Like sometimes I come on some sort of slightly related stream or somewhat related stream and just sort of get in there and just try and make myself at home. And, yeah, talking to new people and interacting with people who I've never met in real life. It's something. It's a bonus of these of the platform, obviously, and the internet in general. I'm just looking at the chat about KMG's fundraiser. Apparently, it's gone well. That's good. I was actually looking up the Canadian pension. I guess he's not eligible for a pension yet. Do you know, David? Oh, David might have stepped away.
Okay, I was muted. I apologize. Yeah, Blundertry did something positive and got himself together to raise over $3,500 for KMG. You know, I mean, he needs a place to live, and I guess you know, like, you know, he's going to be probably, you know, first and last month's rent and moving. So you know, he said 2,500, and people have donated 3,500 over 61 donors. So props to Blundertry for doing that.
Yep, good on you, Blundertry.
Yeah, so if people enjoy the content on Luke's stream, his co-host Kevin Michael Grace could use your financial support at this time, and Melchizedek is going to post the link in the chat for the fundraiser. So yeah, were we going to get into talking about archetypes, or how are we feeling in terms of stream energy?
I have a few things I could say. I didn't say it to LV before, but I could say he has I was thinking he has an inquisitional archetype of a streamer, and I guess Jen is more analytical, and obviously I'm not on their tier, but I would say I'm more declamatory, if that's a proper way of saying it. Doovid, I don't know. Doovid is very widely read and can talk for a long time. Yeah,
so those are just like qualities. Archetypes is something essentially different. It's a cogent personality type, so it has to satisfy a large number of qualities. And there's only so many qualities.
I know that the meaning of the word has some vagaries to it, but you could argue it's a sort of secondary archetype, like the description of someone who does YouTube streams can only fit into certain categories. So it's not like a basic archetype of the universe, but it sort of is encoded into reality in some sense.
It would be layered, that there's archetypes within archetypes. So you have you know, meta-analysis of meta-analysis, where you're pulling out useful data. The pattern is useful because it helps you make more accurate predictions. You know, it's useful if you're making predictions correctly more than half the time, so to say. You know, let alone an archetype that might even make predictions correctly all the time. And you're within the archetype, you know, like a YouTube streamer, that obviously there's some general archetype that all YouTube streamers fit into. There'll be countless divisions among those, and then divisions among the divisions.
Yeah, it's a bit like the doshas, really.
That's the real trick with archetypes, is that for a system to make sense, you can't have that many archetypes. This kind of reminds me of that theory where they're talking about something about how many friends there's kind of a limit to the number of people you can care about on a personal level. Kind of tops off around 100. So yeah, sorry, I've seen
those studies. I mean, Facebook.
I forgot the middle part of what it was that I was saying. I know what the conclusion is. I blanked on the middle part.
It's too advanced for your own good, eh?
You're talking like some sort of useful maximum cap of archetypes, where
Sorry, I'm having cognitive dissonance with myself. Okay, thank you. Yes, I remember now too. But I was talking about the archetypes. So there's that. So the implication of that is that any system with more than a certain number of archetypes, people are going to not be able to care about the archetypes anymore because there's just too many of them to make sense of. So the idea is to like shrink the archetypal typology to lowest cardinality so that you still can actually construct believable personas based on this sort of quasi-finite number of qualities, of potential qualities.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many things one can think of at once or hold in one's mind, like in a given period of time.
Yeah, so, my friend who reminds me of OV, this friend I had back in university, one of the smartest guys I ever know, he would ponder that a lot. He's like, how many things do you think you can think of at once in your mind, Jen? How many different things? He's like, I can't think of more than 6 things. I'm trying to, but I can't visualize more than 6 things at a time. Jen, why don't you try it?
Also makes me think about the question of what's the right size for, I guess, a tribal group of people. I think it's like 200 is one estimate I saw.
Well, it just depends, like, how meaningful are the distinctions? Because, like, if you're saying that everybody on YouTube is one particular archetype, well, that's only going to be as true as, like, the maximum difference between any 2 given YouTubers.
Well, you want to take it pure, like, statistical, mathematical. You say that there's different features and qualities of people where there's a spectrum where a person could fall, and there might be even thousands and thousands of these different qualities and features. Some of them might be more important, or that the other features are directly correlated to certain features that you only need one. You don't need to measure them all, but then any archetype could be created on the proportions of these features and qualities. So, whatever is useful in that sense. So you might not need archetypes if you could just like, oh, here are the different qualities and features, and different people have varying levels that might be changing back and forth over time of these different qualities and features. But then you have these useful archetypes that have these generic cookie cutter proportions of different qualities, and you say that these proportions of qualities are very common among different types of people, and just by understanding what qualities are important and what temperaments are determined by what proportion of those qualities people represent, that's the useful pattern to the person in the science of archetypes.
Hey, Babs, thanks for joining in the chat.
Hey, Babs, and there's also different forms of archetype. Like there's the most the basic, like if you're looking at people, you could say a race is a sort of archetype, but yeah, when we discuss it, we're normally thinking of qualities that are more diffuse than race and more variable, which coalesce into certain groups, which as far as we can tell are solid, or it does us a service to describe them as a singular thing. But people who aren't trained in these things or in logic, they mistake it often as if it's some sort of total description of their personality, as if it's their race, effectively, even though that's not really the case. It's sort of a descriptive system describing what is sort of a deeper, more subtle truth in a conveniently simple way.
Yeah, I mean, we'll bring back, but you just look at the brain, the quantum mind, that's in essence a pattern recognizing machine, and that all people from lowest intelligent, any race or people, that's basically what the human machine does. That's what the mind does, is try to recognize patterns.
Yeah, no,
so
certainly. And I just
are simply ordered patterns of qualities. Sorry, Babs, go ahead. Thanks for joining.
No. Thank you for having me. And I just wanted to say what Doovid was saying. First of all, hello to everyone. Second of all, I agree with what everyone's been saying. I think it's been very eloquently put. And what Doovid just said about, about quantifying archetypes in various ways, sort of at least by secular or semi-secular means, sort of empirically quantifying. Monsieur Lebrun, or whatever his name is, has actually looked into this fair amount, and so have I. He has looked into he thinks there is some validity actually to Myers-Briggs as opposed to what Mr. Ford says, and I've looked somewhat into the Big Five as well as sort of different types of impulses like Jonathan Haidt's what's it called, moral framework has 5 to 6 different axes. So would it be possible for me to invite Mr. LeBaron on quickly to discuss some of these things just for a minute or two?
Sure. Yeah, I sent you the link intending to pass it on
Awesome.
to him. Yeah, thanks for asking. Should be a good conversation because for me, I love the idea, but it's about getting archetypes that people can relate to. And there's something about doshas that pisses people off. Unfortunately, they feel like they're being stereotyped, and then they don't want to go any further, even though it could really help their health and stuff like that. So I used to talk about them more because I was really fascinated with it, but then lost interest because people just didn't take too well to it. But the quantum mind thing seems to be that is actually the archetype system that might end up actually taking off, because I have a tripartite model for the mind where it's 3 different hypotheses being projected simultaneously. So would
if
be
you're going to be talking, I'm going to take like a 5-minute break. I'm going to keep on listening, but I'm going to pop up for like 5 minutes.
Great. Well, we just had
talk
Will's
later.
Power join, so why don't we let him talk for a bit if you had anything to share. I'm going to step away for 2 minutes, but I'll be listening and I'll be right back.
Well, okay, Coltbeck, just give me the brief 411 of what happened in the past 5 minutes, because I've been in between OV stream and Christrat stream and now this stream. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, so
I heard you just talk about archetypes, so I thought, fuck yeah, let's get involved.
So you did an introductory stream for Christrat?
Yeah, that's the one.
Cool. I'll have to sub to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was what was before archetypes. I mean, gee, it's just archetypes, as Doovid says.
Archetypes, something like that. Archetypes.
Yeah, so we got into archetypes. It's a subject that everyone seems to be interested in. So
because I heard that Jen was saying there needs to be a simplified or a restricted amount of archetypes. You can't just have so many of them.
Yeah, it has to be like as simple as possible. I mean, that's Occam's razor.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same as like...
Because to me, I think there's levels of archetypes, as I've said beforehand. You've got, obviously, the archetype of the divine self, and then you've got the masculine and feminine, and then you've got like the levels below that. You know, you could say that you've got the 12 archetypes below that, and then you've got melding of those archetypes can be in themselves archetypal mythological characters, and then below that you start getting into the realm of stereotypes. So I think they relate to each other on a sort of hierarchical purity, you could say.
Well, that's true. And like 10 minutes ago, I was talking about the basic archetypes of streamers in the community, and I was just giving them like a 1-word description. I mean, that's like a lower tier versus sort of archetype, but it still has some basis. And I said OV was inquisitional, and maybe in the future he might actually be able to become an inquisitor. He might like that. And Jen was analytical, and as for you, Will, I guess you're curious. I mean, curiosity seems to be a strong quality for you.
I can second that.
Yeah, I mean, that's also related to like your time in life as well, because you're probably 10 years younger than a lot of us.
Yeah, easily.
Oh, easily, at least.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of like 4 basic YouTube archetypes, and I've got incredulous, skeptic, thought, dilettante, intellectual, and social justice crusader.
There's a lot of these intellectual writers, I find. I don't really watch their things because I don't watch that many like well-produced videos or anything. Like Vertigo Politics, I think is the name of one of them. There's a few of these guys, and yeah, I don't think they have anything. Well, I haven't learned anything from them, let us say. But that's a good. I guess it is good because it provides instruction to people. Even though some of the things they say seem obvious, they're not obvious at all. They're actually pretty advanced.
So let's talk about let's talk about how Josh Neal reckons Jen and I are high IQ. I like that. Let's talk about that.
And that was good, but he left that culture bare.
Yeah, he did. He definitely did. I think for a reason that we all quite knowledgeable about.
Yeah, well, jealousy.
He was very diplomatic about it.
Yeah, he's a very diplomatic person.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
I think that's why he commands respect.
Well, he a good boy for sure. He did a good stream. Maybe not the stamina of OB, but
definitely
he was still like relatively intense. Like he was coordinating what people would say. And if he does start doing long streams, he'll probably have to give that up.
Yeah.
But hopefully, when he comes back, and he does come back, he can do like maybe an 8-hour stream once a month or something.
Yeah, well, that's what Jen and I would talk about. Like, it's hard when you've got a one-to-one dialogue because you're constantly listening and you're constantly thinking of retorts and have to keep the dead air to a minimum. So your brain's actually working at a constant rate. But when you've got 3, 4, 5 people more, then the amount of cognition it requires actually lessens because you can tune out to look at the chat, give your mind a rest, go and take a bathroom break, come back. It's not as high intensity, so you can actually go for much longer.
Yeah, I think probably 4 is a pretty good number.
Yeah, 4 or 5 is probably the max.
It's a bit like the ideal group, social size group as well, at least for conversational people.
Yeah.
You guys are going off into the weeds too much. We're trying to stay on archetypes. But until we get an archetype system, we can't really flex archetypal muscles.
We want a system, do we? Okay.
You need a system because it's like archetyping is a method, not a structure per se. It's just the idea that structures exist. So we don't really have the structure yet. I was trying to come up with another archetype system where it was like 3 different animals, the dog, the cat, and the rat, describing different types of humans.
Okay, so you want so we're looking for, as you said, you want a unified archetype model, is that right?
Well, if we're going to talk about archetypes without going off into the weeds literally like 30 seconds into the conversation about something which is an equal level of precision analysis but not the original topic we're going to discuss, we will need some recursive parameter. Like we need some means of discerning which still leaves enough information left over so that we can rediscern using the same methodology.
Is it sufficient enough to have masculine and feminine and then a spectrum? Is that sufficient enough to categorize personalities?
I don't think so, no.
No,
I think if you do that, it always ends up with certain abstract things being on the feminine side and you can't really be sure why. And well, on either side, really. But it's
okay, so it needs to be between.
It's just not a natural pattern because the natural pulverizer cardinality is 3.
So I think so that's the thing. We need to figure out what are the minimum amounts of variables that correlate to personality types and then find a representation for them. So what would it be? Would it be masculine, feminine pole? Would it be like introversion, extroversion pole? And what else?
I don't think any of those are going to work. Not to be a black. No. Okay. It's not that hard. Basically, archetypes are sort of like aggregations, or if you want to look at it in the like autistic way, it's like aggregations or sets of traits that are commonly found, sort of comorbid with each other, and these altogether, playing off each other, sometimes comprise altogether what would be considered or categorized as an archetype, which is sort of, it's like a categorization heuristic that can have spiritual or psychological sort of implications.
I'm just trying to think of, because we used the dog, cat, rat theory. What are personality types that don't fit in that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You could put people broadly into all 3. I mean, they're not especially predictive.
I'm the rat.
But the dog is the like naive, trusting, intelligent.
The cat is the solo, introvert, that does everything at his own pace.
Basically doesn't give a flying fuck and shits on your bed when you're watching. Doesn't give a flying fuck about anything that ever happens to you. And just kind of a certain flippant arrogance, whereas the rat would be the collectivist, sort of hive-minded, nose to the grindstone, kind of huddly type.
Underground, subversive.
Yeah, I mean, a system like that is almost as effective as male and female, and that's what I was saying to LV on the Josh stream. You can't just saying this personality feature is a female feature. What does that prove? It's a superficial.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Like, if we have a system where we can identify what are like the idea of the big 5 trait personality types. If we have that it's like we have 5 principles that makes our personality, and then a polarity between very and little when it comes to those 5 traits, and then we can have rough archetypes of. So it probably boiled down to about 10 archetypes. You would have, like, on the one hand of openness, you would have one animal or one type, and on the other end of the closeness would be another animal, and then. I'm not quite sure because
the relationship between archetypes, there usually are relationships between archetypes, like there are trees or charts or interconnectivity, etc. But the idea that archetypes must be linear. Archetypes do not need to be. They don't need to be sort of this linear monoaxial gradient where you have one thing at one end and one thing at the other end, which is a type of thinking that I see people often engaging in. I see people often engaging in that type of thinking, especially in the Luke Ford verse, where it's like, the high IQ, high success, high virtue people at the top, and then you have the low success, low IQ, low virtue people, criminal people at the bottom. But I would say that... You have to
slow it down for the goers, babes.
My apologies.
You're doing
yeah, I guess just... there often is interconnectivity and interrelation and sort of playing off one another between archetypes, but it doesn't need to be this sort of monoaxial, linear kind of gradient situation.
Because I'm thinking that's something
a type of reductionism people often engage in. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's a Western thing, maybe it's a 21st century thing, an Enlightenment thing. I'm not sure.
I was trying to bounce this off of Jen the other day. Is when I was saying, perhaps could we see the evolution of other animal species as manifestations of archetypes, and then are we supposed to anthropomorphize and totemize human experience using these animals? So would it be accurate to say that personality types are animalistic, even though they're more sophisticated? For example, you have like a lion heart person who's brave, courageous, a little bit dull, and then you've got the elephant, which is slow, lumbering, does things at his own pace, but don't cross him because he'll wreck you. You've got the cow, which is like, well, I guess you could say like different types of herbivores, different types of carnivores, and then choose an icon of each of those categories, and then put those to each human being. But we'd have to find out what is the smallest number of those categories.
Yeah, it's getting to the smallest number that's the hardest part, and to do that, and even mastering it in general, you have to have like a consciousness of the subtle forces beneath the basic archetypes. Like when you can get to the point of using 3 or 4 archetypes and mixing them in a right way, that's it's a technique, and it's also something to teach people when they're still learning about these things. Yeah, it's also a teaching aid as well as a practical aid for analysis, but it doesn't describe the underlying reality.
I just wanted to comment on something Babs was saying about the idea of it being linear. Like the way that I tell people how to describe it. Hi, monsieur. Thanks for joining. We'll get to what you have to say as soon as I'm done with my mini monologue here. Is you kind of have to imagine the set of all qualities in a circle. And even though the set of all qualities is infinite, you like divide it into 3 parts. And each of those 3 collections of qualities, which between each other also are, you try to sort of sort them so that they're more similar. Then you create a personality which kind of compresses all the information to give you something which we call archetype, which is meant to sort of give the most information about a tripartite set which is still kind of something you can actually get information out of. It's still coherent.
Well, I think what we should do is we should have, say, try and cut it down to 15 archetypes and then see the similarities between those 15 archetypes and see if we can distill them more rather than having 3, because I think we'll go more than 3. That's my personal intuition.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's specifically, delineated sort of ancient wisdom or tradition that's being passed down that specifies these things. If we're looking at crafting new archetypes, I assume that this is going to be kind of like the discussions between physical anthropologists when they're discussing things like race, ethnicity, genetic clusters, genetic groupings, species, subspecies, etc. There will be lumpers, quote unquote, and there will be splitters, and that's simply how it is. And yeah, go ahead.
Can I screen share real quick before you go to Mansoor, just to help?
Sure.
Get the concept
up there.
Yeah, I sent this picture. This is a famous ISKCON Hare Krishna picture, but we talk about archetypes, and chances are for the week in review type streamosphere, the archetypes are going to be us. And you're going to see the camps, the Doovidian, Babsian, Entropian, Blunderian, or Mansourian, Kylian, whatever, where they're just a different proportion of attributes. So this is from the Vedas, but it has a Catholic leaning, where you kind of is the screen share showing?
I'm sorry, I thought I did, but I can't. It's not showing the right thing up on my screen, unfortunately. Is it working now? Because it's saying that I am sharing.
No, I'm looking at the video right now, and Doovid's picture is showing. It's showing some sort of a divine staircase, glowing light emanating down from the top.
Yeah, that's the one I wanted to show, and relate it to the concept of an archetype is a proportion of qualities that say is common among. If we're talking about archetypes among personalities, that there's certain proportions, like how quickly a person is to anger, or how much they're chasing lust or greed or pride. So there's just a common staircase up, where a person chooses the path to hell through first attachment, and then maybe pride, false prestige, greed, ignorance, anger, envy, lust, like the 7 deadly sins that draw a person into hell, versus the path to heaven, to spiritual enlightenment, is the first, I guess, the acceptance of a spiritual master, then studying here the Veda for this one, but wisdom, austerity, renunciation, sense control, to eventually spiritual knowledge. And so you'd have an archetype within that of proportions, and that could be in these camps that I guess you take it off the. I'll show that picture a few more minutes because it's a great one. If anyone has any comment on that, but if we move on, we could talk about archetypes a long time. We could have our own little code for the people who watch these streams, where we've developed this code for archetypes that people who don't watch these streams will never understand our code. Or you could try to come up with general archetypes that even people who've never seen these streams would be able to very quickly figure out our coding. And just talking again, like the science of archetypes. So even if we never agree on what the archetypes are, we could kind of agree on the qualities and the proportions that might appear of these qualities that you make for these pattern behaviors that large amounts of the masses fall into.
I like this idea of having a code system because it's a sort of a shit test that if people get it, then they're on a certain intellectual level to be able to be accepted into the higher ranks.
But it's a narrow casting.
Okay, I agree with what Doovid's saying, and at the end, and I find it interesting. But I'd like to point out, the chart that he's showing is the idea of, quote, higher caste, lower caste. Although these are, these are legit principles and true ideas. Just the mere implication of the image that is being seen right there. It's again, it's this kind of linear thinking. You've got it's like this gradient. You've got at the bottom you've got the sinner, and then you've got the glorified enlightened one at the top of the staircase. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. It's interesting, but go ahead.
Yeah, but any system is intrinsically going to be false. That's why we just got to talk about the science of it and code of language And just on, I've made the point many times to Will's thing, where you either narrowcast or broadcast. So if you make these shit tests where only people who've watched like hundreds of hours of your content have any clue what you're saying, it makes it more difficult. Or if you do it in clever ways, someone who's just interested in the topic and comes along are going to be able to kind of like quickly figure out what's going on. They don't have to go through like, tens of hours to try to figure out the coded language. So, it's better to broadcast than to narrowcast, as Kevin Michael Grace would say.
Can we get Monsieur to chime in with his thoughts? We have had you on for...
Yeah, Monsieur was talking to me earlier about ENFP and ENTPs and sort of like the chicken and the Tyrannosaurus. But if you could expand on that point, starting either from there or just in general, talking about archetypes, personality types, psychological types, etc. You have a lot of interesting thoughts on that topic, so just take it away.
Right. So I think that you guys are approaching things from a very spiritual perspective. I believe that this is a more spiritual stream. The way I see things is not spiritual, rather personality traits allow us our terms we can apply to people and make useful predictions about what they're going to do. And so we can produce typologies, which are not necessarily speaking scientific. They don't necessarily represent some sort of core truth about this, but they are convenient in that you can say, well, this person is angry, which is to say that in certain situations, they'll respond this way to these stimuli. And you can construct these clusters of traits, and you can say, well, certain archetypes are traits that commonly go together, okay? And you can sort of say that in addition to that, because people like to have structure to their life, they're going to some extent, act out what their archetype is. They're going to streamline their life such that it conforms more to the life story they're telling themselves.
I think we're struggling here with the methodology because on one hand, we want to find the archetypes that best explain typology, but on the other hand, we want to try and distill it as well. So we're both talking two different directions. So what I think we need to do is either A, focus on what are the most distillable qualities of the human persona, or B, what are the best typologies to describe human phenomena.
Right. See, I don't distill. I'm not looking for the underlying realities of the thing. I'm looking for what skins the cat, so to speak.
Yeah, so, that's the difference between this conversation and what you're saying.
Well, no, he's just the rat archetype. To him, skinning a cat is perfectly natural. And it makes perfect sense to think that society is built from the carcasses of skinned cats. I have compassion for all human beings.
I'm not sure what that is exactly, but I think it was an insult. Anyways,
wait.
No, it wasn't.
She has a cat, rat, and dog trichotomy.
What is the cat, rat, and dog?
It's just never going to take off. It's like basically the most insulting typology you could ever come up with ascribing
the DCR.
But it is a good parameterizer because it just happens to encompass a large swath of qualities. But yeah, we probably aren't going to use that one.
So what is cat, rat, and dog then? I want to know.
Well, I just said it like a couple minutes ago. I feel like it's going to be too repetitive, but whatever. That's what the small, comfy streams are about. The dog is kind of like the quintessential golden retriever archetype, where it's like, me good, me happy, loyal, smart but dumb, overly idealistic. Then there's the cat, who's like independent, kind of vengeful, but there's something kind of magnificent about the cat. So they're kind of a double-edged sword. And then the rat is kind of the more like pragmatic, utilitarian, which is what you were talking about when with your approach to archetypes, which is why I made the joke. But
no, that works. No, see, yes, I would absolutely be a classic rat in that, and you can see actually what I'm talking about. These archetypes don't perfectly fit people, but they do cover a large amount of cases, and I think that typologies do that. When you have a good typology, you're able to cover large numbers of cases because things tend to be correlated, even though there are edge personalities, even though there are people who aren't precisely what would be predicted. So in the Myers-Briggs typology, I am an ENTP, and Babs is an ENFP. Okay, so ENTPs are sort of schemers. They like puns. They're treacherous. They are plotters. They are dishonest. They are not really concerned about the truth necessarily. And so ENTPs are generally associated with sort of this vizier or spy master, the kind of person that's always the bad guy in movies. So people like, but you can build this archetype, right? Just starting with these different axes, and then you build this archetype, and then you say, well, who fits in that? Well, Henry Kissinger, Otto von Bismarck, Machiavelli. You now have several people who have letters, who have documents, who actually sound quite similar in their thought process, all fitting in that. And you can see that even though the axes we started with were essentially arbitrary, we can sort of distinguish sort of this narrative structure forming around this cluster of people. And then Babs is an ENFP, okay? And so I said that the instinct I use to navigate social situations, the workplace and whatever, is sort of attenuated in him. It still exists, but it has sort of become vestigial. It's used mostly to tell jokes, to be charming. Okay? And I said that, you know, when you lose selection pressures for these systems and you don't need them to survive, they're going to become more of these vestigial versions. So we can see that one of his ancestors may have been an ENTP, but losing that pressure, his line would become less sociopathic over time. So you end up with a Babs. And so that's what Babs is talking about when he's saying, well, there's the chicken and the Chinosaur. A dinosaur evolves into a chicken, even though the chicken is significantly less impressive than a dinosaur.
Well, it can happen.
That actually goes into a point I was trying to make. If you got the cat, dog, rat trichotomy, then you could say that one of the purer archetypes or the more developed archetypes of the cat would be the lion. Someone who is the masculine lion, especially someone who is independent, someone who is powerful, someone who is solitary and hostile to others coming in and taking his space, someone who is dominant, but also still individualistic. And then you've got the wolf would be a pure or more manifest of the dog being fiercely loyal and strong, but still cunning. And I feel like the dog would sort of be the innocent side of the wolf, and the cat would be the less powerful of the lion. I'm not sure about the rat one though. I'm still pondering about that one.
Well, it's meant to be kind of a metaphor for collectivism and kind of a hive mentality on the overall spectrum.
Well, isn't it obvious that a particularly cunning rat is just a man?
Marcel, you were talking about selective pressures generalizing a type, and that's true, but it could also, the lack of a pressure can allow types to generalize as well, especially in the physical terms of archetypes. And you were talking about physical archetypes, so there are such a thing, of course. It's just, I guess, that we're less interested in those things. And yeah, the more spiritual sort of archetypes we talk about, they do, like in the dosha system, they do overlap with physical characteristics. Like you often hear that in the doshic analysis. They'll just look at like the size of your thumb, how much you sweat, and they try and correlate that back to a more intellectual / spiritual origin or division of qualities.
I think there's kind of a lesson in there to learn that doshas, the less of an NPC you are, the less your physical kind of doshas dictate your behavior, and the more of an NPC you are, you're basically sort of 100% aware of the body. So that's one thing people need to take into consideration. If they're looking at Ayurvedic doshas as a means to go on the path of archetype typologizing, or however you want to call it, it can be, you know, it's very hard to learn, but it really works really, really well. But you also have to kind of realize that there's some stuff people just don't want to hear about themselves.
And the whole thing about like being an NPC or not, that's like an orthogonal measurement to conventional doshas. So it sort of contradicts it to some extent, and this is the sort of thing you have to take into account.
It doesn't contradict anything. They're just two different archetype systems. And the idea is that what we want are a couple of archetype systems that are very low cardinality that we can sequentially create.
Well, if you're looking at a measurement, like if you've got a series of questions to ask and you're asking someone that, the less NPC person, it'll be harder to establish their real character from those questions, because I find I'll have a more like intellectual interpretation of the questions, and which sort of distorts the measurement if you're testing a dosha by a set of questions.
Well, that's why the written word is now considered authoritative. I mean, it's not knowledge put out there intended for people to start diagnosing other people with. It's meant to be on a path of self-learning, and maybe, you know, at some point in the future, getting some deeper knowledge. But it's just really meant to be. I think the best way to use it is just for fun. But I guess people got a little bit offended sometimes, so I kind of stopped doing that after some years of being interested in the subject, kind of, I don't want to say superficially, but just like in a playful way. But
I've put some more. Sorry, Jen, do you want to finish?
No, it's okay.
I've put some more notes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're going to sign off. I think we covered the weekend. Archetype's pretty interesting. We'll probably be able to talk about it for hours and hours over the next few weeks, and there's a lot of research on it. So, you know, it's definitely worthy conversation, but I got to take care of some things. So I appreciate you having me on. And thanks, I thought it was a good week in review. As said, there were so many streams and things happening that you couldn't even watch all the videos. And hopefully we're legitimately making progress, pushing ideas forward, like archetypes and quantum mind. And it's definitely a productive conversation. So I'll listen back tomorrow.
Thanks, Doovid. Great to have you. Take care.
Okay, buddy.
See you soon.
Everyone have a great week.
You too.
All right. See you, Carl. All right, so I've got a couple of notes here. I've got cat as the archetype of the individual, dog as the pack, and then you have a dichotomy of fierce and passive. You've got a rat, which is collective rather than pack, and it also symbols cunning. And then you've got a termite, because I was trying to think of a way of what could be an archetype for the collective that acts in a drone, because I think a rat is they still have self-interest and they still are very intellectual, but a termite will act like a drone against its best interest. So a drone is a termite would be inherently collective, destructive, but will still drone like, you know, act on hormones, pheromones, instincts.
Yeah, the challenge is that they're all collectivist. So it's a matter of distinguishing which is most and which is least.
Oh, I think a cat would be the least. I mean, even though they still sort of have posses that they walk around in, they still would be the most individual, then the dog, then the rat, then the termite. Because the termite acts on 0% self-interest.
Cats have more of a society. I mean, I know this is a tangent, but cats do have more of a society than we traditionally believed, just because we weren't really thinking about their subtle forms of communication. So like cats.
Yeah, but it'd be the difference between, like, okay, so you have a dog would be a suburbanite, you have a rat would be a urbanite, and you have a cat would be a farmer. Like that's
well, maybe more like
the density of the society. And then
like
a termite would be like an apartment building that's filled up to the brink with fucking Vietnamese people.
Do you have a lot of termites where you are, Will?
Not where we are. We're pretty good.
You're in the city.
No, suburban.
All right.
Yeah, we get some in the wood heap, but not too much.
Yeah, there are some difficulties living out there, from what I hear.
What's that?
Oh, just like, termites, heat.
Australia is a problem in general.
Australia.
Why is it so hard to stay on the subject of archetypes? See, this is
it's
an archetype of nations. Like Tasmania.
wow.
That's a bit more like New Zealand, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think Culture
that,
Bear is just being a subversive. I think we need to boot him off the conversation because every time I go on a tangent, he's the cause of it.
Every time you go on a
think
tangent.
that you're making an error.
I think
In that-
it's autism amplification.
When you're devising these archetypes, you're trying to force something new axes into these archetypes, and when you have something that doesn't strongly differentiate between certain, when you don't have the axis already existing in this archetype structure, then you can't really force it in. So like you are doing a, place of residence, right? But because you can find all these animals everywhere.
No, that's not the argument. That's not the argument. The argument was how their social structures behave. They behave as in different densities.
Yes, but you're starting to talk about urban and rural and suburban, or to tie it into things like that.
It's an analogy. It's preferred social structure. So they all have societies, but there's different densities. So a dog would be in a pack rather than in a colony like a termite would be. A cat would prefer to be in a home having its own space than in a pack. And then a rat would prefer to be in whatever you call a rat's nest or what have you. And then you have a termite would be one that exists in close proximity with each other in dense populations.
So like vampires. Hey, what's you guys' favorite vampire movie?
Van Helsing.
Anybody else have one?
I like the...
Why do you keep on changing off the archetypes?
Well, I mean, movie genres, that's a classic example of archetypes that's pretty accessible to normies, like movie genres. And I would say the Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee Dracula one was pretty good, whatever that was called.
So talking about this rat's nest idea, like someone who's trying to be pragmatic and sort of manipulate others and harness resources is not going to do well when there's too much competition. They actually want to be away from people like them, even though they're still in a group. It's not like,
well, their niche can be like oversaturated. Like
it's only if there's too little resources. If there's sufficient resource and there's no competition, then they do flock together.
I'm talking about the actual humans, though. I assume, again, this is talking about human tendencies, no?
Yeah, and it's exactly what happens. You have the financial sector, and people want to live in an area where the financial sector is strong, so they can make the most amount of resources.
Most of these people are not what I would call rats. They're just trying to... they're following along with the system. They live in their cube, and they're just they're providing
together. Together.
They actually
Tell
believe
me. Listen.
in.
They're marginalized.
They're marginalized and they flock together.
He's actually not doing too bad of an accent, to be honest.
Guys, let Monsieur finish. Monsieur, I was actually interested in.
Sorry, Monsieur. Yeah, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Monsieur. Then I want to ask you.
He's doing really well.
Most of the people in an organization, to some extent, they have some notion that this system they're working for is actually good, or at least neutral. Like they believe in the mission. So. Again, if everyone in the area is a cynic, then you don't really have an organization anymore. So you can't.
That's the argument against Judaism, because they're all cynics in the civilization, and that's what I mean. Like the difference between the rat and the termite. The termite is just drone-like. They all sit in their boxes and do their little jobs, and they all believe in the system.
Exactly. Basically, it's like all those sort of trust experiments. The trust experiments. You know what I'm talking about? There were all those experiments done on sort of like the tragedy, the tragedy of the commons, and the person putting money in and taking money out, and or like one person can call the other person and take their money or something, and then there was another there have been a bunch of sort of social science experiments that have discuss this. I think I know what you're getting at. Yeah. Also, Monsieur, you were talking about sort of like organizational archetypes, like within, I think, a corporate setting. You were talking about like the level 8, the level 9, etc. And although that may again be sort of like a more kind of like secular, kind of like almost kind of like functional, occupational descriptor, I think that was also an interesting kind of semi-archetypal thing you were hitting on, or there may be something to draw upon there. Sorry to interrupt.
I mean, not those terms precisely, but when speaking of occupational levels or
you were talking
ranks
about
or
organizational
grades,
structure.
yes, so
organizational structure, yeah.
Right. I don't know if that's an archetypal thing, but there is class coding within an organization that is at the higher levels. You see upper class people engaging in value transference. So the beautiful Dartmouth people proliferate at higher levels and not at lower levels because they don't actually do anything, but they are necessary to the functioning of the organization as a social unit, if not a profit maker.
So I've just noticed that I put 4 archetypes down, archetypal animals, and you've got the cat would be the priest, the dog would be the warrior, and the rat would be the merchant, and the untouchable would be the termite. Sort of drone-like, does whatever his base desires tells him to do. That acts in a collective and congregates.
You're thinking of the 4 castes, right? I mean, Shudra isn't untouchable. Untouchable is outside of the caste system, I think. But either way, 4 works pretty well too, as well as 3.
Do you think that archetype can manifest itself in physiognomy?
Sure. I mean,
I think we lost Babs there.
Okay.
The answer to whether it can is yes, and the doshas is what maximizes that overlap, that idea. But theoretically, other systems could exist.
Is there any human being that doesn't fall under those 4 categories? That's what I'm trying to think of. Because out of the termite, for the specific reason that I didn't think the collective drone was presented in those 3 archetypes.
What about the mystic? I mean, there's unusual things, but they're necessarily unusual, like a mystic.
Because obviously within each archetype there's a spectrum of how much or how much they don't manifest it. So as I said, it's typology.
Yeah, it would fall under that. I was thinking of a madman. So obviously a mad person could arguably...
Well, they're hyper
like
individual.
A wild person who lives
hermit.
outside of society.
Yeah.
You could say that's a type, I guess.
Yeah. Like the man that lives on the mountain. There's something priestly about them.
Well, yeah, I was thinking more of like the reject. Like there's a type of person who's like that who's not so priestly. But anyway, if you're talking people who don't fall into those archetypes, they're so few and far between, it's not even worth considering.
Right.
For an overall system, yeah.
So once you have an archetypal system, they have rough but not perfect correspondence with other archetypal systems, and it should cover most people. Otherwise, it's not complete yet. But it's not going to be perfect because some people will vary in axes that aren't measured by your archetypal system. And because different as long as you, that's right. And
you just have to know it's not covering everything. It's not a perfect description. Right. It's not like a brick of one weight and another brick of another weight. It's not 100%.
Let's stop virtue signaling about how we're not being stereotypical. Okay, clearly,
I am being stereotypical. You can go shove it up your ass.
If we can distill the totality of humanity into 4 groups of fucking animals, we're not as smart as we think we are. We're not doing too good. I'm pretty sure there's more subtlety going on than that. It was more of a throwaway example system, and I don't know how relevant that would be to people in general, but for some reason there seems to be a huge barrier to people accepting doshas, maybe because the pit of people get butthurt about it, and then they get angry, and it just creates a bad vibe.
Well, they take it too literally. And it's sort of, they feel like they're being described, and I don't know, some people are too much into the individualism. So, I mean, it's like they can't accept their type, and obviously trying to be an individualist is a type. I noticed outright
people don't realize they're manifesting their archetypes when they're opposing certain things.
Monsieur, do you know any like TCM?
What is TCM?
Traditional Chinese medicine.
Oh, no, not really. It's
like the very general idea that certain systems of the body are like more hot or more cold, and that kind of means something in terms of a diagnostic tool.
Yeah, I know that.
It's that
Okay,
the Indian version. It's like it's a personality, very loosely personality archetype canonizer, but primarily it's a medical system for tissue diagnosis that separates the body tissues into being essentially like more or less like one of three doshas.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Is the Chopra Center quiz a good quiz?
Guess.
Okay, I'll take that.
No, I said guess, not yes. As in.
Oh.
Don't worry,
Sure.
I'll get you a good.
I like any tests.
I'll get you. I'll get you.
What kind of cheese am I?
You can't really diagnose yourself 100%. I mean, nobody can do that, but yeah, you can get a general idea.
Yeah, I want to take a test and get a grasp. Where did Babs go? Anyways.
I think he's muted. He's probably stepped away.
He's not here. He dropped out of the call.
Oh, he's there.
You guys just keep talking while I can't.
No, sorry, that's you. That's you. Yeah, I see in the chat. Outright Jewish dentist wants to come on and have his dosha analyzed.
Yeah, maybe another time.
Another time?
Yeah.
Yeah, he asked if I could analyze his dosha. I mean, I could probably do that in a poor way, but it's
do me.
It's Jen who's the expert.
Yeah. Kind of going to this point that I was saying before is that you can actually tell to what extent the doshas influence a person, because it's your humors. So your humors are like the attributes of your body, and if you don't have much of a mind, then you're dominated primarily by your body, and so it's really easy to get pretty good impression. But for people who are dominated of the mind, the body doesn't give as clear an indication as to what that material is, because there's sort of something in the mind that's more substantial, that's where the information is rather than the body. It's all about where the information is.
Right. So that's sort of an axis that exists in Myers-Briggs as the sensor intuitive axis, but doesn't in Big Five. So all these systems that don't necessarily have all the elements of others.
Honestly, I just don't really like most of those MBTI type systems because I don't find that they actually clarify anything. Like, how far does a conversation really go in Myers-Briggs? Like, I can't even remember my own diagnosis, and I have taken the test, and I really have no clue what my diagnosis is.
I'm retaking it at the moment because these guys keep on talking about it. I took it ages ago, can't remember.
So yeah,
people have certain biases that make it very difficult for someone to take a test on their own and get any sort of accurate result. But I guess you could say this about the doshas too, because I am.
Well, none of us know each other well enough to take the test for someone else, so
right.
We got.
Even taking the test is like a skill in its own right. But if you,
that's accurate.
Mondieu, have you got the same result multiple times on these Myers-Briggs tests?
Yes.
Yes, because I've taken it 2 times and got 2 different results, which is probably. I guess it's partly down to the wording, the way the test is, and even your mood, I guess.
Well, if you take the same test multiple times, then you should get the same results. If you don't, it just means that you are changing your answers based on how you feel at the time.
Sure, and you wonder if there are people who consistently fall.
I think a personality is more of an Overton window of moods and behavior.
I would agree with that, and again, going back to it's difficult for people to self-assess.
Yeah, I made
it's like the highest difficulty.
Basically, some of the questions, or the ones that people tend to not answer honestly, is the solution to that is just getting a loved one to answer the question for you. So it is possible to kind of get pretty good results, but your ability to know is your own awareness of what they mean. So you have to like have a good knowledge of basically how your entire body works from start to finish, which is not realistic for most people, but maybe we could come up with some kind of, because actually, come to think of it, I actually do have something in a book. I'll have to go dig it up. It's in my notes about different, not just doshas, but like some type of additional qualities about the dosha, like the high karma version and the low karma version, like the good version and the like degenerate version. And that was pretty interesting stuff. But yeah, if we don't do the dosha archetypes, we are going with like pure personality archetypes. So for people who are more like brainiacs, it probably makes more sense to do a mind type archetype system versus like NPCs would be the dosha type system.
Right. I'm having trouble here because they keep tying answers together with how your mind is and how your body is. So like lively is very much a physical characteristic, but intuitive is more of a mental one. So I would consider myself intuitive, but not lively. So it makes it difficult to pick. Do I have a slow? I mean, I have a slow body. That doesn't mean I have a slow mind. I'm. How much do I want to describe myself? I'm a big guy, but so I'm not skipping around, but that's
okay, well, if you go to a party, are you like going up to people and be like, "What's up, man? How's it going?" Or do you sort of show up a little later, kind of like slink in, just chill out, kind of get some minor thing going?
The thing is, I do both. As I go in there at the start, I'm like bang, 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 like how's everybody going? Do a couple shots. But I really go to parties because I like the drunken conversation at the end. You can't just skip to the end. You have to go through there and earn that trust and be a larrikin and have fun. And then they're like, this guy's all right. And then you get those conversations. But I really go for the conversations. I can get wasted anywhere, but I like the really good conversations at the end. Sitting on the couch, 2 a.m. in the morning, just talking about the nature of reality. Good shit.
Yeah, so can you answer the question if you're lively? Like, can you answer that question, Will? Are you lively?
I am lively, but I don't like being lively.
Yeah, so Monsieur, I'm not really sure how you're interpreting the word lively, but I guess I would say this. It's a dispositional thing. You're either kind of on the balance more enthusiastic about things going on around you, or you're kind of on balance more passive a little bit and observing what's going on.
What is the pitch of my voice?
It's extremely monotonous. You sound Catholic to me, but
no. But is it high pitched, medium pitched, or low pitched?
Low.
Low. Okay.
I think so.
You talk like this, and it's really invigorating to listen to.
I think of someone like Otto. He's physically. I'm sure he's not physically lively, but he's mentally lively.
What the hell are you talking about? His tagline about himself is, "I'm the most blue pill normie."
Otto? Well, I mean, he's somewhat mentally lively. I mean, I guess he's obviously on something. I mean, he has potential to be mentally lively.
Yeah, there's a difference between the intensity of someone's soul and their general engagement in day-to-day activities. So the liveliness.
Well, he writes, doesn't he? I mean, he's not lively in talking, but that's
physical. Oh yeah, the lively writer. That's not a very. I can't imagine that archetype.
Well, I get bored trying to write.
It's because you're not a writer, because you're lively.
Right. I associate liveliness as physicality. So whatever. I picked lively, intuitive, even though I'm not lively. It just bothers me. The question bothers me.
You're too dead on the inside to be lively? Is that the problem?
Yes. Sure. Yes.
It's okay. You know
Jennifer,
what?
do I often spend time exploring unrealistic and impractical yet intriguing ideas?
I know what that question is asking, and it's like whether you're more of a dreamer, an idealist, or a pragmatist.
I think I'm in the guts between agree and disagree because I like exploring ideas, but not that are impractical.
Yeah, that's why it's a tough question for you.
Here's another one. Like, I love sports, politics, luxury. I love politics and luxury. I don't like sports. Again, the body
That's just
part.
A shit test. That's a fucking shit test.
Yeah, the body part. I guess that's what you mean by, like, when you're more a creature of the mind, what your tastes are don't really correspond to what your body looks like or is. the humors of your body, right?
I just posited that for the first time ever, just sort of.
Well, I agree with it.
But I'm glad you agree with me, because I've been tossing the idea around for a while, and I was like, I guess my goal was to sort of get people to stop being butthurt about taking a dosha quiz, because a lot of Pitta people get really upset.
Yeah, see the monotoneness, because I don't give a shit. I'm gonna take a test. I'll take lots of tests. Why not?
I just have a vision of what you look like in my head, and I feel like you're Catholic, but we'll see. We'll see just where you end up on the scale. I'll be interested to see, actually.
Okay.
Are we doing the test now? Are we doing it live? Let's do it live.
I'm taking this test live.
I haven't done this since my.
I'm doing the test lively. Lol.
I did
What
this.
test are you guys taking? Are you taking the same test or something?
My pulse can be described.
Well, I think if I don't know if you have to answer all the questions, but some of them are pretty. I guess because I went through a bunch of different tests and I found that one was the most complete. It's not a perfect test. None of these things shouldn't be looked at as perfect. They're more just about getting your head around a certain.
No, I gotcha.
Jen, you often contemplate the reasons of human existence. Agree.
Is that actually on the test?
Yeah, this is on the 16personalities.com free personality test.
Okay, yeah, because I didn't think that was on the link that I sent. Because I sent an actual test link, but it probably takes.
No, it's in the side chat. I just didn't click on it. I'm redoing this one I used to do because I know I got an answer. I'm seeing if I get the same answer.
How
being
many
a scientist.
questions are you through, Monsieur?
I'm on part 3 now.
Oh, okay, good. So
it's kind of a long test.
It's a pretty long test.
I'm on question 66.
How big
out
are
of
your
100.
bones? I assume this is a euphemism for fat. So
no, it's not a euphemism for fat. It's a euphemism.
I don't know how big my bones are. How would I tell?
Like average size bones.
Just look at your hands. Just judge by your hands.
The best way to tell is to here. I'll show myself on the screen for a second to explain them.
Ooh la la.
Telling. Just have to.
Here we go, Will.
Rubs heads together.
Yeah, so you just take your pinky and thumb, and if you can touch them, if you can't touch, then that's Kappic. If you can just touch Pittic, and if you can overlap, that's Vatic. Hope that clears it up.
I can just touch. What does that mean?
It's not even close. I can't touch. It's not even close.
Just embrace it. You're obviously a Kappa.
Oh, you're a Kappa.
I'm just taking.
No, fucking, what are you doing, Kiffa?
I don't know what that means, but
it means non-believer, someone who's going to be beheaded in the future.
Yeah, not in the
that's fine.
Quranic state.
Hey, church, I can just touch my fingers together. What does that mean again?
Pitta.
Wait, pinky. Wait, is it thumb and pinky?
Yeah.
Fuck, that's difficult. No, I can't touch it. What's that mean?
It's not an exact science. It's just.
I know, but I want to know. I'm curious.
Don't you mean index finger? Isn't it? Don't you mean index finger or middle finger, Jim?
Either way, I can only touch it together when it's my middle finger.
Pinky to thumb around the thinnest part of the wrist.
That's impossible.
It's impossible.
I don't think a man can do that, to be fair.
It's not
a real man.
Yeah, I can't even get it around the other thing, you know.
You've got Trump dwarf hands. That's the real problem.
No. Use man hands.
So what is the can't touch thingy? Am I a cafe?
I don't know. I haven't done your diagnosis because you got creeped out when you asked me if I was Facebook stalking you, and I said yes, but not like in a creepy way. I was just looking at
It was a benevolent, friendly, creepy stalking.
Well, that's what Facebook's for.
A friendly neighborhood stalker. I'm just making sure no one robs your house.
Yeah, just downloading all your pictures, eh? It's nothing serious.
I'm just kidding. I mean, I think like it doesn't matter as much what it is when you're highly intellectual. So for me to say it now, I kind of worry that you'd potentially hinge too much importance on the definition. And I don't really know to what extent it's going to be relevant because it's
My wrist hurts now from doing all that squeezing.
It's pretty simplistic. It's pretty simple. It's simple. It's fundamental, but it's also not going to tell you a whole lot about yourself.
Can I take a guess, Gene?
Sure.
Oh, I think he's pretty Vedic, obviously, right? You agree?
Well, the thing is, how old are you? Well, if you don't mind saying.
I just turned 22.
Yeah, so he's young, right? So it's like it affects it, right?
I don't know. It's pretty lively.
It's, but kids are all.
Veda is like fire and sharpness, right? No,
well, I'm an Aries, and that's typically me. I'm a fiery personality, headstrong, stubborn. Even though we don't evade the zodiac here, but that is typical of my personality. And I did have, when I was younger, very, very hard emotional issues when it comes to anger, frustration, impatience. But you learn to temper that over time. You hope.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Yeah. So who came back on?
That's
Babs.
Hey, Babs. But yeah, passion is something that is centered around my personality. Like, I'm a very passionate person, very energetic, very full on, very 0 to 100 or 0 to 60. I don't know what you guys measure your speed in.
See, to me, it's obvious what his dosha is. So what were you saying you thought his dosha was, Culture Bear?
Vedic.
Yeah, so that's like, first of all, you said that one had fire in it. It doesn't even have fire in it.
No.
What?
The one with fire is Pitta.
But isn't Vedic more energetic?
They both have their own kind of energy. So this is why it's important not to talk about stuff when you're not.
Pitta is fire, and it's associated with oily foods.
Well, that doesn't.
Pitta is associated with the oily.
I love oily foods.
So I got Vada and Kappa.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what I would have given you. You're the like librarian archetype.
Love good debate, sporting event. Fuck yeah, where that can be competitive. Greatly is very sharp, quick-witted intellect. This sounds about right. Oh, but I'm self-diagnosing. Oops.
So I got Vada and Kappa, but I don't think that the Vada physical characteristics describe me well at all.
But this is why you're an example of a person who your mind is so developed that you identify yourself more with it.
Yeah.
So the mind is the dominant dosha of the mind is Vada, because
the only thing I disagree with when it comes to Pitta is that my preferred season's autumn. That's my favorite, when it starts to get cool.
So the physiognomy described for Vada appears to be the physiognomy of the stereotypical wasp, imperially slim, high-cased, aristocratic.
Yeah, you have to kind of make a distinction between alcohol and antidepressant addiction and being truly Vadic. I mean, the thing is that 70% of illnesses are Vadic in nature, so they will like be misrepresented, and a lot of people are ill, so you kind of associate maybe more of their personality with their illness than you should. But you know, I'm not sure if I have a clear enough archetype of what did you call it? Wasp? Is that what you call the archetype? Sorry,
the body shape. So it's physical characteristics, right? And the Vada physical characteristic is sort of like the sort of lanky, slim person, right? And that's narrow-faced, and that's what we would that's associated with the wasps. That's associated with higher class. So scientists have made a composite face of homosexuals, and when it's put to people without knowing it's gay face, people identify it as high class face as well, because it's very androgyne. So, you know, slim, narrow, androgynous.
That's interesting. I mean, my view of upper class would be masculine. So there's some sort of cultural interference occurring. And there's also problems of like translating it between races, I assume. From what I've read of the Doshic thing, it's obviously orientated to Caucasians and arguably to whites even in some instances, even though it comes from India. But these tests are for white people. Overall, they're made for white people on the internet.
Based. Up next on Dictatorship, will white people on the internet save us from certain doom?
We just have to keep taking these tests. Yeah, if we take enough tests, then we'll maybe achieve enlightenment. Gene?
Well, that's the funny thing about it, is it doesn't really do that, but it's meant to be a tool for self-discovery and gaining self-awareness and being able to, craft larger narratives. But what do you guys think? You think the doshas thing will catch on and it'll kind of be like a quasi-dialectical thing, or just fringe?
Yes, it'll take off.
Yeah, bro.
hang on,
could you tell me about the
moment.
doshas? Jen, could you tell me about the doshas, please? Sorry. Wait, no, go ahead. Go ahead, bro.
No,
go ahead, bro.
So the dosha, it says that Peter are made of fire and water. They are sturdy Vata types, tend to have warm side and prone to heated imbalances like fevers, hypertension, pink eye, and skin problems, acne, eczema, and rash. I have eczema. Just saying. I do get very hot. I cannot sleep unless the fan's on if there's anything above 25 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, fuck off, Bubs. It's not funny.
Hey, man, fuck off. It's not funny, man. You're picking on my accent. I don't appreciate it, man. I think you can just fuck off, man.
All right. I'll
This is
retreat for
racial
now.
discrimination, you fucking cuck.
Yeah. Well, what's new? I have a quick question in terms of dosha categorization. Jen, if you could just do a quick overview of sort of everyone in our immediate spheres, if you could just give your dosha-ized opinion. I'm curious to hear some of your takes. And then perhaps
dosha? I mean, I didn't know KMG when he was younger, but he seems to be like a little bit more on the Pitta side. I think we talked about Luke as Kaphic mostly. And I don't know, we didn't really go into it that much. I think Claire's probably Pittic. And was there anyone else you wanted me to touch on?
no, I was just generally curious. But sorry, go ahead.
What about Judas?
Judas?
What about his dosha?
Oh, fuck that guy. Fucking Judas. Oh, he's the perfect place for Judas at the end of a noose.
He's just asking.
I don't want any calls to violence on the stream, please.
Yeah,
hey, he could be hanging by his wrist, okay?
Let's keep it classy. I just haven't talked to him enough, and I kind of worry about doing too many diagnoses of people because I don't want them to take it the wrong way. It's more just like for going into a more intellectual. I don't know. I guess in a way it has to be self-evident if it's going to work. So I don't know, like, does me saying Luke is Kaphic, does that make sense to people that he would be the same dosha as Monsieur? Whereas Kyle has a different dosha? Like, do we know what Kyle's dosha is? Like, what do we think?
I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Well, pretty Vedic, isn't he? Pittic Vedic?
I don't see too much Vedic qualities in him. But I'd have to look closer, and actually diagnose his flesh, which I'm sure he probably wouldn't be too comfortable with.
Flesh.
What about the gunas?
That's just more of a state of spiritual purity. I don't really think that one's going to take off. I think we're going to have to use the quantum mind for that.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay, maybe.
I think if we
I like that one.
One. The problem is, Babs, people can't tell the difference between good bad karma and bad good karma, and I don't want to have to go into that with 10 million whatever abstractions. That I just don't want to do that. I'd rather just go from quantum mind and talk, and in the context of NPCs, so people basically being on a continuum between insensitive sort of cyborgs all the way to hypersensitive, cry because a flower died type person. That was a bad example.
What? A flower died?
Yeah, people
Cut for the
put
flower.
insects out and stuff. Yeah.
Across for attention, up and down for results.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is helping. Maybe everybody can do their own dosha quiz and we can talk about it next time, but then it kind of becomes like a girly sleepover type of discussion where it's like,
oh my god, can you read my palms? Oh my god. How many love lines do I have? Oh my god.
So I'm just
these meme archetypes, you start basically talking about the soy boy archetype, and so these memes sort of represent archetypes, and it is an innate and in our thinking, the people who are into this internet culture.
I mean, why is it also that people are drawn to the, type of, I guess, what could be considered egoism that is, oh, let's take our, personality quiz or whatever, or our spiritual type, archetype quiz, etc., and share the results. At the same time, though, at the same time, though, where does this come from? This comes from a desire to see oneself as part of a broader picture, broader framework. That is where the longing comes from, and ultimately, all these archetypes do kind of fit into play with one another. So therefore, it's actually perfectly understandable.
Well, it's a good point how people want to fit in. Yeah, most people, they want to fit in pretty precisely into some sort of societal system, and they're so hungry for it that.
So I got.
If they're told, hey, bro, let me finish. If they're told when they're
no worries, bro. Cuz fuck you, no, you sweet my cuzzy G.
In a vulnerable position that they're really a woman or they're homosexual, you can see why these people sort of fall for this. It's like a trick to give them an identity.
I got INTPA, and I don't remember having this last time.
Oh, that's the version with assertive turbulent. That's crap. Anyways, yeah. Means you're a freaking nerd, bro.
I know, it's a logician. I'm a magician when it comes to numbers. I'm a logic magician. But that's not what I got last time. So
and
I don't know.
INTP
well, my personality
kind
has changed a little bit.
Yeah, the INTP is the traits associated with that. It's the kind of person that has all these. It's really focused on, getting down to the facts, which they hold to be inviolate, and just arguing with people on the internet.
Jeez, that doesn't sound like me at all. That's not what I do all week, every week.
What's the shorthand for INTP, Monty?
I mean, I don't know anything about you. Do you spend all your time arguing on the internet about minutia with your own crazy ideas?
People just
okay,
my catchphrase is semantics. Everybody just says that to me all the time.
Right.
It's like
yeah.
every time you mention the word semantics, I'm there.
Right. So an INTP is the kind of person, they've got their own very firmly held theories that probably nobody else shares, and they will argue you to death about the details of their system that nobody else understands.
Innovative inventors with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge.
That's a very flattering way to put it, but yes.
there's
I think
them
they're in the business of flattery.
There's an architect one and an engineer one. Is that right?
I mean, the names, every site has their own names for it. The idea is usually the same. They just pick different names because reasons.
This one says architect, logician, commander, debater. So that's INTJ, INTP, ENTJ, and ENTP.
Right. So
the last time I think I got a, what was it? I think the last time I got a logistician, which was a bit different because I was a much more of a Spurg and cat back then.
So what? It was that ISTP.
Yeah, because I know that the. Yeah,
so
most of it is the difference between
the sensory intuitive axis is about, I guess, coming up with your own ideas, thinking for yourself. An ISTP might be a mechanic. They're the kind of person that says they fucking love science. They love learning about science or machines or something along those lines.
Yeah, and when I was that way, it was. And then the J and P is the judging versus perception or perceiving. And that was me. I would like, unless it's in a logical system that I can, formulate,
right.
then it's nothing.
See, I didn't know these things about you before. I'm just going off the system.
Yeah. Well, it's accurate-ish. It's
yeah, it's close enough.
It's pragmatically accurate.
Sorry, I was just reading the chat. The Magic Key says, "I will pray for you, Jennifer." Isn't that like one of the most condescending things anyone ever says to anyone else?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that could actually be Brundlefly. He told me to repeat.
Or the other one would be, "You'll understand when you're older."
That is true in some ways, though.
Yeah, it is.
Sometimes that's true, though, man.
Sometimes when you're in your early 20s, you can think you're going to be like that forever, but you're not. And that's why
but it's still condescending.
I was retarded in my early 20s. I don't know if that sounds condescending, but I'm actually glad that I just like didn't do stuff. I didn't do any debates really in my 20s, and I'm really glad about that.
Oops, my mistake. I do all my debates in my 20s.
You're not really doing debates, though, because you have the attitude of discussion and learning, and that doesn't actually usually lead to fights. So I would encourage you to go on that path.
If I was actually searching out for fights, imagine how much fights I would actually get in.
Unfortunately, being associated with me gets you like trolled by like the smallest band of clowns anyone's ever seen. That their only common cause at this point is like that they are opposed to me.
Yeah, it's united against a common enemy, and nothing good's ever created from that. You need to stand for something, not just against something.
Well, in this case, some lulls will be created in the process.
The memes will be glorious.
Well, isn't he basically on the level of like what's it called, Kiwi Farms? Is that what the website is?
I think that's what you said before.
Has he ever been bothered by someone as much as me? Like, is this normal for him? I don't know the guy well enough. Do you know Brundlefly at all, Monsieur? Like, what is stuff like?
I mean, I would consider him a friend. I don't really know him too well. I'm not really going to speak too much about that.
How long have you followed him for, though?
Not
very long. Because how long have you been on Luke's show for?
I don't know. Not really keeping track.
Oh no, you didn't make like a note of it. You don't have like month anniversaries.
Are you taking the piss?
No, I was just asking.
She's asking a genuine question by taking the piss.
I didn't think it was piss taking. Well, what's wrong with it? We were on this perfectly respectable topic of how Blundertry is definitely not making any PR mistakes at all. And I just want to know how long Monsieur knew him for, or how long you followed him for, because
start of January.
Maybe this is like normal for him, and he just does this to different people.
So about 4 months.
That's like his thing. Okay, 4 months. Cool. Thanks. Yeah.
I had to interject to stop the ramble.
Maybe I should just research it or something. I wonder if anybody ever did a compilation video of him as a person. Probably not.
Well, hey, there's an area of opportunity, but you have to demonstrate competency and provide value. Someone out there is going to provide a compilation video, a competent compilation video of Blundertry's blunders.
Well, we'll see. I don't think a lot of his videos remain online. I'm not sure if he like had a channel and lost it, because I guess a lot of these guys have had channels and then lost them.
I don't think so. I remember him saying, I've been doing this for like a year, which is hard to believe. He seems to be good at working with some people. It's sort of hard to believe. I mean, he's quite likable in a way, but I do think...
What are you talking about?
What?
He's likable in a way?
Well, I quite like him, so... Sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry. You can like whoever you want. I mean, to me, he just sounds like...
He's a Brightwing SJW. He gets triggered all the time by facts and logic.
Yeah,
Jen Sharp is the Ben Shapiro of the diss right. Facts don't care about your feelings.
Someone's got to make my face and Ben Shapiro's. That would be classic.
This needs to happen.
You do use the phrase magic key, don't you, Jen? So.
Yeah, I did.
So this guy in the chat, whether it's Brundle or not, he set up the account. This for you, probably.
No, Luke says magic key as well.
Does he? Oh, okay.
I think that's actually where I got it, because they were talking about the magic key of IQ, although maybe it wasn't actually Luke who said it, but it was on his show.
It's definitely not a magic key. It's more like a spreadsheet that's useful.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as magic. Deal with it. Magic is science we haven't learnt yet. Hashtag Thor.
I'm trying to remember.
Science, where we come from, is the same thing.
So I guess you don't really watch Luke Ford, well, so you wouldn't have seen the fight on that channel.
It's too grug and too many Jews, so I don't participate.
Monsieur, were you there when there was that fight on Luke's channel with Kevin Brundlefly? Yeah, and it was Kyle and Brundlefly, I think. Yeah, that was. Were you there for that one?
Which fight between Kyle and Brundlefly?
The one that was like the The most recent one, I think.
They've been fighting all week.
Oh, have they? Oh boy. So what do you think about Luke's model about taking it to a blood sports type show with those guys?
It's his show. I'm not gonna make a decision or say something about it. I'm not at liberty to discuss such things.
So you're just like the really neutral guy. So neutral.
I think apathetic would be a better term.
Why would I be partisan in someone else's business? That's not good policy. You never know where the future is going to take you.
Yeah, that's cool. I guess we kind of talk about people all the time on the stream, and people don't really get offended by it. But if you don't want to, it's totally no problem. We can just keep it to the archetypes.
There's something urgent I need to bring to your attention.
Sure.
Ovi's about to shut White Light Sunday down without going 12 hours. We have to jump over there ASAP.
Okay,
It should be done like 5 hours.
I know. We need to help him. It's only him and Tom now. We need to help him out.
Okay, can we leave, Jane? Do you want to go over and invade the channel with more you as well?
I will just end the stream. Thanks everyone for coming, Monsieur. I hope you're not offended by my question. I was just being friendly.
No, I'm not offended. I'm
right, we're coming for you, man. We're coming for you, dude.
Thanks for coming on for the first time, Monsieur. Will, thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'm a fairly difficult person to offend. You have to impugn my honor.
I will definitely keep it in mind. It's not on my plans. It's not in my agenda to do that.
All right, au revoir, monsieur. Nice meeting you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.